recording. I did a little list of topics that we said we wanted to go over. I'm just sharing with chat here so we can. I mean, I think we can pick and choose what to start with. Perhaps Reza could start with his idea. We had a bit of discussion, Reza, about the things you mentioned to me when I was in New York, but I think it's probably best for you to talk about them. Then the second thing is something which, unfortunately, Daniel is not here, but he was the one who suggested it last meeting, 2 meetings ago, right? That we should try to create some form of circuit. Like if we are interested in outlets for our production, why not use his group to do some sort of combo, right? Then there is a problem that we decided to write, that we set up to another huge task with the crisis and critique text. We're going to write the history of everything. And then they said, yeah, just do it in 10,000 words. So we now need to rethink what we're going to do. Then there's the idea of the reading group of Immanence of Truths, how we want to schedule that and go about it. Then there is the issue which has been talked in the backstage, underground topic of conversation amongst a lot of us, because the majority of people here are Brazilian, but even when there is one person who only speaks English, every Brazilian needs to speak English as well. So we were thinking about trying to adopt either a translation method or, Google Meets has a real-time translation thing, so we can caption meetings as well. So we would either make it easier for non-English speakers to follow sometimes, because sometimes people have trouble, or if there's only one English speaker, we could speak Portuguese and then they can still understand, but we can, shift the meetings. Then there's the issue of what will be the next newcomer presentations, which I think there are some people who haven't presented yet who might want to, and then just a general schedule of what's next, right? So I'm not sure which one of these topics we should start with, but
which are the shortest ones?
That's the 8th point that I should have added.
Yeah, because I think
what point to start.
I think we had discussed previously the immanence of truths, and I think it was we talked about having doing each 2 meetings. One of them is the reading group. I think that can be a simpler topic.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of, yeah, just setting it to, if everyone is on board with that.
Yeah.
So that would mean that other types of presentation only happen every 15 days, right? And also that the rhythm of meetings for the reading group would be bi-weekly. I think that's how you say it, right? Every 2 weeks. So if it's okay with that, if that works for everyone, I think that's something we could decide. I think we should also decide other things, like when we did the Logics of Worlds one, we looked at the table of contents and divided, I think, roughly 50 pages. Was it 50, Carol? Per meeting, right? But
yeah,
people were...
Yeah, something like that. And also we divided thematically. Like I was interested I was interested in I was interested in the transcendental, so I presented the transcendental, you presented the object, Reza presented change, I think. Yeah.
And then the number of meetings per thing was then roughly giving like a manageable amount of reading, right?
Yeah.
But we didn't read together. The idea was whoever was responsible would kind of present the material, and the meeting would be a mix between that presentation and the discussion, right? And the coordinator for the meeting would shift as we moved along the themes or chapters or so on, right?
Actually, if I remember correctly, we did like 2 cycles. That was it. Reza started with the introduction and preface. Then I did transcendental, then you did object, and I think Dennis did relation. So this was the first part, the worldly part, and then the change part started, and then we did another cycle. It was like Reza, did change. I think I did points. I think, this was it. It was like that. Like 2 cycles, 4 people.
Yeah, but I think
How many
okay. So
people do we have now?
yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. It would be good to find out how many people would commit to taking a chunk of the text and be responsible for presenting it, right? This kind of first pass of the material, even though we're gonna discuss it and together, but I'm not sure how many people would be up for it. Yeah, so we have John's up for it. I'm also up for it. Perhaps I can, I'm not sure how we can. So 1, 2, 3, 4.
People can raise their hands on Zoom.
Okay, let me do that. That's okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with Reza 7. Yeah. So I mean, we can still ask also to those who are not here, but we know at least 7 people. I imagine, I mean, if you just take it, just like being very kind of rough about it, the book has 600 pages, right? So if we have, let's say we have 7 people, at least that means nobody needs to be responsible for more than 100 pages. Of course, they are very uneven in density. So I think the more people we have, the better. But, you know, if you just combine these 2 things, we already know, like every 15 days we're meeting and nobody's going to take more than 100 pages, you know, to deal with. That means that you actually have quite a slow kind of, you have a lot of time to get around it, you know, unless you get like the early stuff. If you like responsible for presenting stuff in the middle of the book, it's going to take a while and you're going to have a lot of time to read it over and prepare, I guess.
I'm also curious.
Sorry, John.
I'm also curious, lying diagonally to that, what people's thematic interests are so far in the text. I mean, for me, I'm very glad to take a chunk, but also diagonally to that, what I care about here is getting the large cardinal stuff right. And I don't know whether that's everybody's goal or not. I'm curious.
I think last time what we did, I mean, I think this was really, really productive, though I think it was also something that alienated some people or that made the group not that interesting to that many people, which was we kind of set out to focus on the formal and then read the conceptual from the formal. So none of us were up to date or experts or even kind of properly versed in the material. So it was very hard to do that, but at the same time, it made for the conceptual, I think, much more productive conceptual discussions. And then we had like what we called interludes, where we would just stop, forget Badiou, and just go over some, you know, textbook stuff to learn the basics of something. We were really helped by Yasha, who's not here now, but between Yasha and Dennis, who's here, pretty much they took over doing this mathematical interludes and just going over like topos theory and, you know, Joyal stuff and things like that. So I think that was pretty much the mix, like in the chunks of text, not like to do our best to focus on the formal stuff as the thing that shines a light on the conceptual stuff. But then when it, you know, when the push comes to shove and really need to read it, we just stopped and went to like source material outside of Badiou and not just to take him at his word for the math stuff, right? I think that was pretty much, yeah. This is also something we did. Dennis mentioned this in the chat here. We kept a website where we had like the recording for the meeting with the chapter title, and then next to it, everyone who wished to do so would write like short written notes, comments on the section. So like you had a written commentary and the video register for that chapter's discussion. So it was really much, in the end, we had like a informal reading guide, you know, chapter by chapter. I think it looked really nice. It was really useful for me afterwards, you know, to go back to it. And so we could try something like that as well.
There are 2 points on which I strongly agree with you. I think you and I have already talked about the first one, namely that that's the direction, if you're going to understand the book, that's the direction it has to go in, from the mathematical to the conceptual. Otherwise, you just wind up superimposing preconceived notions about what the terminology means onto the math. And that's a disaster. I'm sure all of us here have read some of these Badiou without the math people, and it's pointless. The other thing, I'm really glad that you mentioned going to some of the standard texts, and also to the extent that they exist. There are a few philosophical reflections on large cardinals out there that can be presented as alternatives. Badiou doesn't really do that, but it's worth doing. But even when it comes to the math straight up, of course, it would be unreasonable to expect Badiou to have already done this in the text. But if you're going to get a sense of what these things really are, that's independent from the particular order and the particular angle of Badiou's exegesis, then you have to compare multiple presentations. Otherwise, your understanding of an object is not distinct from that of a text.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll stop pontificating now.
No, but I think that that's really important. I think that could actually give us an opportunity to do something that, I mean, I'm sure not everyone in our group will be interested in a reading group with that characteristics. I think that's also one of the reasons why I think we need to be clear on whether this should be done on Mondays every other week, because the more specific it becomes, the less attractive to the group as a whole it becomes, the more reasonable it might be to have it done in a separate day and free our Monday meeting. So I think we should be very clear on that, not to create like an alienating activity that not everyone is engaged with. But on the flip side, I know that one theme we have been facing a lot here, because we thought we set up a group to, I remember the day this penny dropped. Like we set up a group thinking we were looking at the intersection of people interested in politics, humanities, philosophy, and formal mathematics or sciences in general. But that's always an opportunity, not only for a conjunctive meeting, but also for a disjunction where there's always something you don't like in a meeting. So it's not only that you can bring different people together, but that it also guarantees that there's always some element that you dislike. So especially for the mathematics thing, I know a lot of people here, me especially, one of the things that I learned from doing the Logics of Worlds group is just learning with the help of others how to engage with a text that's written in a language that I don't master. You don't need to be absolute, like you don't need to be proficient in the language, or let's say a native speaker of it to be able to find your bearings in a foreign language. So there are degrees of engagement that are still productive. You can still learn something. You can still demystify a lot of stuff, even though you need other people to help you out, or you can only follow a bit, but at least you start learning how to compare this text with that text. So I think as long as we also take that into consideration, that people's interest in the mathematics is very different, and the fact that we might have to engage with very hardcore stuff in one level or another, it's also an opportunity to try to find a way to learn how to cope with this difficulty more generally, because this is definitely one of the things where Badiou sounds the most French for me. Like when you open Being an Event and he says, clearly there is no level of difficulty here. Anyone can just, with a bit of hard work, get through this. I mean, there's a big parenthesis there about, what a French student ends, his high school years with, what sort of, how much humiliation of not understanding something is socially acceptable in your country and things like that. And that's actually quite unevenly distributed. So it's not that easy, I think, to win over those resistances of finding a text that is coming from such a foreign place to the traditions that people reading philosophy or interested in politics are coming from. Though I think he's a master didactician, probably there is some kind of care we can take and, you know, a way of helping each other out, I think it can be productive as well. So for example, probably having this distinction between, well, everyone goes, like, even though it's a principle that you try to present the most, taking the most care you can with the formal stuff, we can come up with these interludes from time to time where we then focus on that, and then you can choose if you want to come and, you know, delve more into it, but it doesn't make your own work of presenting or impossible if you're not comfortable with it. I think something like that we would have to we have a WhatsApp group, but we're trying to empty it out of long conversations because it can just become pure chaos. And we created a Zulip forum. I'm not sure if you've used it before, which is a really cool tool. We're still kind of, yeah, it's been good. Like some discussions are happening there already and so on, but it's still kind of picking up pace. But it's one of those kind of forum tools. It works really nicely. A lot of, I think the category theory people use Zulip a lot. That's where it took the idea from. Yeah. But anyway, like, I think considering all these things together, and I mean, it would probably be easier. I think the two big concrete decisions we would have to take. The first is, okay, considering the level, like the size of the task, you know, the fact that it's going to take a while, that it's not an easy thing to read, so on, and that it has all these bumps in the road. I'm not sure if it's that obvious that we should just do it on Monday, or if we should try to find a different day for it, like just to make sure we're not hijacking two meetings a month, and for something that is not on the benefit of everyone, you know. An alternative to make it the benefit of everyone is, let's say, every couple of cycles of presentation, we actually sum up what we did and we present to the people who are not, you know, feeling like joining this bi-weekly thing, so that we can actually give something back to the people who lost the meetings. You know, I don't know, like, we can come up with some more creative solution as well, but I think that's the first issue. Yeah.
I'm in favor of adding another day. I think 2 weeks for a reading group itself is a little bit too long. This is an intense book, and my experience with the Logic of Word was that the fact that we were meeting every week was helping a lot in order to follow on the text. So I'm okay to add one more day, especially like sometime like Thursday, which is basically evenly spread. But it really depends on everybody's schedule. But between adding one more day or starting, I'd rather start than wait for a day to open up.
Sorry, I didn't understand the second thing.
So if we cannot add another day that easily, my priority is, I think that what is more favorable to me is to start, even if we have to do every other week.
So if we do every other week, you would like to go early in the presentation?
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm not. I'm saying that adding another day may prove to be difficult, and may take us another 3 months to find the right schedule. I'm saying that if that seems to be the case, then I vote for every other week
until we.
Yeah.
I have a middle ground proposition, which is I also think I agree with the rest. I think it will probably take 3 months so we can find another day. So my suggestion would be we start every other week, and then after a couple of months, we can check back and see who's interested, who's not. And it will be easier to see who wants to continue the group, so we can find out when this meeting will happen. I think it will be some sort of, I mean, it will filter out who wants to continue with the group and who wants to just keep on the regular meetings, in a sense. I don't know if that, so like in 2 months, we could check back and see, okay, so we've got these people who are sticking with it, and we can look for another day that doesn't have to deal with like people who may be inclined but don't really want to, but then the group gets delayed. I don't know, it's
yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because that could work, because two months is actually just 4 meetings. And I wonder if in 4 meetings, we're not going to be, you know, at the end of the prologue or something like that. So that means pretty much the introduction before the first chapter. So it could be something like we hijack the Monday group every 15 days while we're doing this introductory thing where he actually does, like, you know, that previously on being an event, and then he goes over everything. And then when we get to the first chapter, we say, okay, who wants to migrate to just a weekly thing? And we have a clearer ground of who is interested or not. I mean, that could work.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because it, like, the compromise to test drive the beginning of the book is, I think there will be a much higher turnout than the committing to like the full thing. But I think I would also add to, like, once it moves to the new day, like keeping this idea of like every now and then going back to the main meeting to sort of like sum up to everyone.
Yeah,
the progress would be nice to sort of like socialize the effort into like.
yeah, I think so too. I mean, one thing we cannot do now, just because, I mean, the English version of the book, the PDF doesn't have, I'm not sure if anyone has the printed version, but the PDF of the English version doesn't have a table of contents, so we can actually check, you know. I know the book has 20, how many chapters?
There is a
26.
table of contents in the
26 chapters and 26 suites.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, there's, but like, if we don't go into, let's say, I don't remember now if the introduction and the prologue could be considered 1 chapter each in terms of size. I know that the chapters in general are quite small, actually, in the book. Like, he made really kind of thin. No, not true. Like, there's some that are longer now, I remember. But easily could have, like, if we separate like chapter plus suite to be like 1 unit, you have around 26 to 20 to 30, let's say, divisions plus interludes. So that's, you know, if we only spend 1 meeting per unit, that's 30 something meetings. I doubt that we're gonna spend just 1 meeting per one of those chunks, you know. So I think it should be considered like a yearly project. Even if it's a weekly thing, it's going to be like a year's worth of, if we do it like that, right? Unless we decide to take larger chunks as a unit. But then I think that's a really big decision to make, like how fine-grained we want to make it, you know? Especially at the beginning, I think there are some things that could probably be, like, I'm not sure we need like 2 weeks on Emily Dickinson, perhaps, or Emily Dickinson. I would spend 2 weeks on Emily Dickinson, but Victor Hugo, like, I think that's,
we could just move. Like French references. We just take it like, oh, he's French, so no Mallarmé. No. But Emily Dickinson, Wallace Stevens. Okay, we can keep that.
There's a lot of Fernando Pessoa at this time, man. Like,
oh yeah, that's good.
His Judith
generally, my observation of Badiou's examples they are more confusing than the text itself.
Yeah, in Logics of Worlds. Yeah.
Hard agree there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in Logics of Worlds, the examples were a bit crappy.
More confusing.
So just so we don't overextend this topic, because we have other topics. So I think we can be set that we're going to hijack the meetings temporarily, and while we hijack them, we can start mentally working another day for those interested, and then but we can already put on Zulip those people who are interested in presenting, so that that gets out of the way also.
Okay, so I'm just writing
If
here.
somebody can take on the task of translating the table of content from French
I can do
PDF.
it.
Yeah, so that would be a way to organize. So that would be another to do that we can publish it on Zulip.
Yeah, I can do that easily. Just do the table of contents with the page numbering, because I think the fine-grained decision of what chunks, I don't think we should do it without, you know, looking at the contents and the page numbering, actually reading through it, like just cursely, because
I can help you. If you translate it, I can find the page numbers in the English PDF.
Okay, great. I'll send it to you tonight. So just the things we're deciding on. So we would start on Mondays for a while. So for a couple of months, every other Monday we would do this. I mean, it makes sense also because it kind of doubles as a general introduction to Badiou's project for people who are interested. After all, it is quite kind of, you know, he takes you by the hand in the beginning of the book quite clearly. Then once we end the kind of prologue intro part, which should be around 2 months or so, then we try to set up a weekly day, alternative day, right? And do we want to have a, I mean, perhaps that's up for the general schedule point there, but do we want to kind of have already a date to start? Like, does anyone have a restriction or something like that to when it would be good or something like this?
I was talking, I mean, the meetings we have planned are the next one where I'm going to talk about Sérgio Ferro, and then there are 2 meetings that you're going to do about why class matters, and then the other texts, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking of condensing 2 into 1. So
okay.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much time. So apparently the last one that's already scheduled is on the 20th of June. So the next 2. So we could still start in June if that's good for everyone.
I'm up for that.
So that would be the 27th. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
John, how is it for you, man? Would it work? Yeah.
Not too far, but also far enough so we can mentally prepare.
Yeah, I was going to mention to Rafael and we're intending to also present Rodrigo Nunes' book. But I don't know, did you schedule? I don't think, Rafael, maybe it's not scheduled yet.
Yeah, I think we mark it, but we found a date. Let me try to find it in our WhatsApp conversation, like 1 second, and then we can just sort this out. 1 second.
Yeah, then the trick, I think what we can do, like, to make it easier is I'll create on our website the Zoom link for, you know, for the next 2 months, every other week, the Immanence of Truths group. So when you go there to schedule a different meeting, you will see the ones that are already taken. So it's easier to plan, you know, like, okay, the 27th is taken, but the next week is not. Then it's only in 15 days that's taken. So it's easier for you guys to plan when you want to present. So 13th is Ferro, 20th is the white, does class matter? The 27th is this. So the next meeting, if you guys want to already schedule it, after the 27th, the 4th of July.
4th of July.
That would work, yeah. Because I spoke to Renzo, like the last time I spoke to Renzo, it was, I think, on the 20th. Like we wanted to do something after the 20th of June for his availability and mine. But then the 4th would work, yeah. I mean, the more time we have, the better, really.
So you have infinite time. The problem is, can you make it more fun?
Yeah, true. No, and also like it's good because we will do like a public program with Rodrigo with at the news center. Like I'll interview him so I can bring the stuff from the interview also. So like I'll be working on that like during the month, and also I have the output from the CPC reading, so it shouldn't take too much labor to actually put it together. Also, if because JP was with me also on the thing, if like you have the time to also like hop into that and we just like do something together, like the three of us, that could also work. Like
What, me?
yeah, on the Rodrigo thing, because I know that like
Yeah, if you want, no, if you want, yes, of course.
yeah, I would be happy. Like we
Because
have
we did this close reading of his book, so yeah, we can do that.
yeah, we work.
Just let me know where you're at with Renzo, what you organized already. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I wanted to maybe present something about that stuff like philosophy of language and value form theory, so, which is my new fucking weird obsession. Maybe just a Giannotti beat. I'll think about it, but then I'll hop in when it's more ready. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we already have a free slot on the 18th of July. If you're up for it, I just added on the chat there.
18th of July. Yeah, I can do that.
There you go. This is how a little bit of terror.
Terror? Where's like, the terror?
No, if you're not even seeing it, it's even better. That's
okay. Yeah. I remember you reacted like, oh, this is so fucking polemical, like to have a presentation on Giannotti, but yeah.
No, I don't think it's polemical. But my okay, so this is just one other thing, because John said here that he's doing other courses, like other reading groups, right, around the immanence of truth. The one online you're doing by yourself, or because there's this topic we had here to discuss. Unfortunately, Daniel is not here, but one of the things we've been talking with him is of using his online program thing, where he's been doing a lot of stuff to do short courses, interviews, and things like that. And he's actually currently engaged in trying to set up a small event with Badiou. He managed to invite him once before, so he thinks he will do it again. So I'm not sure if you already have an outlet for the group you want to do, but probably talking to him is, something that if you want something like that, like a platform, definitely we could talk to him to host something like that.
Great, yeah. A lot of the younger people who are interested in it, I've met on Discord, but it doesn't have to happen there.
Well, but if you already have a platform and you think it works there, I mean, you can...
No, this sounds cooler.
I'll talk to Daniel. Definitely, he'll be up for it. Especially because this is another topic for discussion, which is last time we had like these more institutional meetings. Daniel had this idea, which kind of riffs off of Reza's idea, that we should have like a more consistent outlet for our production. Daniel said, why don't we do something where, let's say we published a piece, then his podcast does an interview with whoever wrote the piece, or we can do a short kind of workshop where we send that material to the people who are in his group, and then we discuss it with them. So he suggested a lot of different activities we could do to kind of create a circuit between the more inward looking stuff we do here with the more outward looking stuff that he does there, since there is some good overlap, and since we were also talking about, which is another aspect of what Reza brought up, this recently we've been talking about how to cut some more consistent chunks of research out of our crazy discussions, like whenever something seems a bit more organized or accessible or kind of groomed, what would be the easiest way to cut it off, either like take the time to transcribe some presentations, revise them, and then try to publish them in somewhere. Like these things could form a nice circuit where we do an effort of publishing things we've been working on, and then we take those publications as the material for online courses or workshops or interviews with Daniel's group. So I don't know, Daniel's not here to explain it better, but I think it's something to consider, like if anyone has ideas in that direction. And Reza, if something like that also if that also contemplates, like takes into consideration the sort of thing you were worried about,
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with Gabriel and Yasha when we were in New York, and basically piggybacking on the experience we had with Atlas, I thought probably if we had a forum through which we can do a more organized research and organized production of the outcome, I think it would be a lot better in terms of getting everybody involved, and also making our group more known to outside world, as opposed to only the format that we have, which is mainly an internal thing, and everybody is doing a presentation of various different research topics that either interest them or are related to some other research that they are doing to this group. So the idea of Atlas came as something that was suggested by an outside group. What I was thinking was, well, don't wait for somebody to ask us to write something. Let's come up with like what is the next version of what we want to put together, and then either we can use a platform to publish it, to make it publicly available, or even go with the idea that we publish it ourselves. If we need to set up or create the channel through which we have to publish, that probably requires some administration, some funding or financing and stuff like that. We can talk about it, but I think that would be very positive for how this group and the research in this group can progress.
Just a second. Rafael is asking me if I'm hearing shots. Yes, I'm hearing. You're hearing that too.
Yeah, sorry guys.
Just some people shooting some guns near our house. Yeah, I mean, as I told Reza last time we spoke of this, like I have the impression that there is a bit of a trap in the idea, of like I totally agree that we need more interlocution, that we haven't really thought about like currently, I mean, honestly, like currently, if you want to know what we're doing, you need to watch 3-hour-long cryptic meetings, which I mean, it's already hard enough. Or you can read even more cryptic, ridiculously long texts that are available. So, I mean, we haven't really done a real effort of, becoming accessible or inviting people in an official way. I think all the work has been done in this direction thus far has been very informal, even though I think for most people to join here, some work of that order was necessary. Like I was just remembering Rafael, Miriam, and I talking to Michael, who was drunk the other day in our house, and we were like, "Don't leave us, Michael. Stay with the group." And it always takes some like therapy, informal therapy stuff to keep the group together and to talk to people, learn what they want. So even though formally we haven't done that, I think informally this has been done a lot, you know. As we said last time, Reza, like it might be that on the level of bureaucracy and contracts and formal protocols, we don't have any of those, but a level of gift giving, you know, reciprocity economy, the work is, there's a lot of effort. So I think we should just be careful not to mistake the fact we don't have like a platform or something like that for a void that is just waiting to be filled. Because the reason why it hasn't been filled, I think it's a mixture of, it takes a lot of work, like one by one, to actually find people who are interested in finding a place for everyone and mixing their researches and finding common ground. And second, because in some level, there is such a saturation of journals. Like, I think that my personal position is that there is a choice to be made between creating a platform and then struggling to make it legitimate for others, because if you are interested in other people, those are the people who should consider it a valid platform, right? Or to actually take the effort to format the stuff we do in a kind of form that is recognized as legitimate by already established platforms. So rather than create a new one, actually put things into a shape that, you know, already existing journals can actually take it. I mean, I think those are two different.
I'm good with the second one too. So what I'm suggesting is more for a more organized way of research in our group. So if, for example, something like that we did with the reading group, if, for example, we set some topics or targets toward which a group of us, let's say, that are doing research and then doing presentation, like we are already forming that. Like in the ZULEP, for example, in the ZULEP organization, we have various different topics. Those topics, those research topics will grow over time. But if we had a way to organize them, say, for example, axiomatic systems, topology, category theory, in the theory of foundations, and then another section. So if we organize these sections and we set dates for these sections to be presented, so that is one way to do that. So I'm not.
But how is that different from what's happening now?
Maybe it's not different. Maybe I'm not caught up.
I mean, let's say with this schedule, we're just coming up here where, you know, there is a discussion on Sergio Ferro's materialism take on art, then discussion of theory of class, then reading of Badiou, then presentation of Rodrigo Nunes' book on organization, then Badiou, then Caron on Gianotti, Marx, and Sellers, then Badiou again, then, you know, I mean, if we had
maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Maybe I am missing the big picture. The only thing that is, for me, is not clear is the relationship of this to a big picture.
Yeah, no, that part is hard. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly, I agree with you there.
So if we had a big picture that, look, this is the big picture and this is a rough time frame for this big picture to come together, then yeah, I mean, that is.
Yeah, but then we have a problem, like, which is, you know, I do think that there are issues there, and I find it hard to get people's interest. I mean, I'm not sure actually. Like, there are people here which I think are interested in, let's say, the kind of provisional big picture we were able to construct from time to time. So we publish some texts, we have like a general discussion of some political horizon we're working with. Some people are more engaged with that. Some people are more engaged with very specific things that are being presented, and they don't really necessarily care for the big picture other than in just some vague way. Other people is the inverse. They really care for the big picture and they don't really understand why we're spending time on some of the steps we're taking. I think it's good that we can interest both people, right? The issue is that because we don't know what the big picture is, because we're trying to construct it, what we have been doing this far is, I think like this is how I would schematize it, right? We have a local principle, which is, I think has two clauses. Present something that interests you, present something that you think is loosely connected with the stuff we call this big picture, which has to do with, politics, and we have like those early texts that set up a basic idea, and try to connect your presentation to other people's presentations. That's a local thing, right? Select something from your interests. From those interests, select the thing that looks vaguely connected to the framework we're developing. And when you present that, try to connect it to other people's research. That's like a local prescription for whoever presents. And the idea is that in time, once we have a lot of presentations, we can stop, look back, and we will have a better view of the actual global construction we're doing. I think that until now, not that many people have kind of stopped to do that. Like, I think for now, I've been the one who has stopped and do like presentations with the titles like mapping our research, or what have we done thus far, or 5 theses of the SGPP. Like, that's me looking back and trying to summarize the work other people did as well, not only my own. But
Yeah,
like, we don't have that frame.
Actually,
right,
yeah,
that framework
actually was written in the same spirit, like looking back.
Yeah. So I think
So
that
no, I agree with you.
in that sense, it would be hard to have like a map with a deadline that we can already say where we want to get, and people should choose what they do in that direction, But I totally agree that this sounds very nice on paper. Oh, look how nice, you can select a bit of your research. And then, but in practice, it's like chaos, right? Like sometimes you spend like 6 months, nobody knows what we're doing, start feeling like it doesn't go anywhere, or it's not clear to see how things go together. So it's not like this nice thing where every week things fit together so nicely. And I feel like it's chaotic most of the time. And I think it also makes it anxiety inducing for people who are arriving, because then you say, what the fuck? Like, how am I supposed to bring together what I like with this chaos? Like, it's not clear. Or it might look like, you need to have a much clearer grasp of what you're studying than you need to be here. So I'm saying all of this, but I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying that I think for now, this has been like kind of the method. We can change it if you guys think there's a better one. But I think there's also the option we're not doing a good job implementing this idea, if it is a good idea, rather than saying that we're just lacking an idea,
Yeah, I if there is, you cannot force a big picture. A big picture has to arise from the work that we are doing. So Atlas, like when we were talking in New York, Atlas took place because it was time for it to take place. We did not arrive on the idea of writing Atlas ahead of time. We did probably 9 months research prior to that, and maybe another Atlas needs to wait for another 9 months. So if we don't have that big picture, we cannot force it. So in the absence of that, then what we are doing is the best we could do. But can we at least agree we put an effort? I know that you you're doing it already, but put an effort to basically take conscious steps towards every once in a while toward the big picture
Yeah, I
and
think
having a presentation.
yeah, I totally think so. I think that there are a couple of things we're not using in our favor that we could be using, honestly. One is, I mean, probably follows from this method that having a clear way of picturing, you know, the sum total of what we've done is useful. Like, you know, if we need this retroactive look to get a glimpse of the big picture, it means we need to be able to look at it. And we did have that very bad kind of tree of meetings in our old homepage, but it didn't do any service. But I just think it's, you know, either out of curiosity or because we need to present to other people or because somebody's not understanding. I think those are the three good reasons to interrupt and say, what is the big picture? And then try to come up with one, right? Either because you're interested in it and you want to stop and, okay, let's see how these things can go together, like all these different things that I've seen this far. Or that's a good reason for a meeting that you don't need to prepare with original material. You can just kind of investigate previous stuff. Either or because you're writing something for a public or presenting something to other people, right? And thirdly, if you're not understanding, I think we don't make it easier always for people who are not following what's going on to feel like they can stop and say, what the fuck is going on? I mean, we should probably value that more because that's probably the most organic kind of marker that we should look back and try to summarize things or clarify things or glue things together, right?
I think Rafael wants to talk.
Yeah, I had something, but I'm not. I'm not sure if I can phrase it properly. So I already like apologize in advance. But I have the feeling that it's sort of this feeling of because there is a sort of an entry level not entry level requirement, but it is felt as if there is an entry level requirement of understanding what has come before, like before you present something. And this is not always easy, of course. And like I'm talking from my own engagements with the group and these types of things, because like sometimes if you didn't like you sort of, there is always this feeling, and I have the impression like I only got more comfortable with the group as soon as I started recognizing this feeling on you guys as well, who have been here for much more time than I have, that like things are sort of walking and like you're trying to catch up with them, but they sort of walk autonomously, right? So like there's not really like nobody feels like they have already catched up to the group. And I think that that's the good part of it. And but it also generates this sort of like the sort of vibe the sort of vibe differentials within the group, in which like some people are really vibing with that at some specific point and some people are not really that much at that specific time. But I think that there has to be like a sort of I think what Reza said is really good, because you have to have this sort of like twofold effort in which like both the big picture is brought to the people and is related to what we are saying, and perhaps a revision of that big picture is also the topic of an intervention. And I think that like that presentations could be framed in that specific manner, not really like be it a very minor revision in which you find something like, okay, I would phrase this differently. And I think that the Atlas is helpful in that, because it offers the sort of like a very concrete big screen, which everybody like sort of can get as a ground level, you know. So like from the people that are already here and that work on the Atlas, we can consider the Atlas as like the ground level of that. But of course, as we get more people, we have to update the ground level, and like we have to not necessarily like make another Atlas or like just be making an Atlas per year, which is a crazy proposition. I mean, we could do that, but but it's too crazy. But I think that we to have this feeling of like revision and intervention into the bigger picture for the presentations, because then it becomes easier. And also like we have to commend to the fact that like what Gabriel was saying, that like the labor of doing the big picture has been mostly central, and organizing the making of the big picture has been a sort of like centralized effort. We have to really tackle that as something that like we might want to delegate in another way. Like I think Rodrigo's book has an interesting bit on that, which is the question of like the leadership function and the vanguard function in a lot of ways, that like it works, that you have to have some sort of like some sort of way of phrasing that big picture. And perhaps while the atlas is a sort of like a ground level thing, the other thing that we do could be something like, how do each of us actually like fit into that, but like, you know, in a way that revises what the atlas is doing and not merely just like continues on like framing itself. I think we have to like, we put the atlas up in a way, like we built that up, and we have to be committed to tearing it down from time to time, and from tearing like small assumptions within the system from time to time. And this has been something that has like interested me greatly, like at least where I am going with my own research. I think it's very much related to that, like to a specific slice of that, because of course nobody can actually like reveal the full thing yet, but we see that there are like small things that we would like to change. Like from my side, for example, like I'm very interested in the state capital relationship, like BNC in a way, and like this is where I'm trying to get like sources from the outside. Like my interest in like capitalist power framework has been framed into that, because I think it's a sort of it's a different phrasing of the relationship between B and C. So I'm looking at that right now into like from that perspective. And I think that we have to try to wrap the presentations from the older people into that sort of like, where does that intervene, and where does that find trouble with the atlas? And if not trouble, at least something that we would phrase differently over there. And because I think that this is what makes it sort of keeps the wheel going, and like the revision of the framework as such going like beyond what we want. Of course, the Badiou group is an example of that sort of revision, because we want to be up to date with what is happening with like the whole Badiou thing that we developed in the atlas, but that goes further also. Like I think we have to find a way to integrate things that not everybody is actually reading into that revision, and try to wrap them. And I think this changes like how we prepare for the presentations, and how like everybody also receives the presentations in a way.
Yeah, I'll go next. Yeah, I mean, based on what Rafael was just saying, I think we rarely go back to the old presentations and do that consolidation work. I think that would be good. I was just checking it. We have right now like 67 meetings, basically 70 meetings, each like 3 hours long. That's over 200, maybe like 300 hours of footage and of conversations. So it's like a huge undertaking, right, to make sense of all of that. It is a bit like the split between the seminars and the Korean, the con, even where you have this like chaos of the seminars, all these references that don't really fit together, and then you have the super condensed stuff, which we use the monster diagram really well. I feel like there are certain diagrammatic and visual tools that make our group consolidate things quicker than others. And we kind of see that in Gabriel's presentations on 5 theses, or what was presented at the new school. Those are kind of like maps of the big landscape. But yeah, I was thinking maybe the website can serve a better function here. One thing I was thinking of adding to the website is tags to every meeting. Right now, you can only search the meetings by like keywords of the titles. But I think it might be useful to add tags so you can quickly find different topics, and maybe arrange those topics in a more visual way. I don't know, just some ideas.
I just wanted to say a few things that I think are related to these issues. The first one is something I think I've talked about it with Gabriel and also with Renzo, and actually it was inspired by an idea that Gabriel had about his presentation in New York, is that I think one of the forms of looking back is not only trying to do the effort to synthesize, but also the effort to try and get back to specific presentations and try and just deal with them specifically. Because in a way, I think when we try to transcribe certain presentations, whatever they are, I think it's inevitable that we will be doing the transcription, not only doing something that's a mere copy, but we will also, I think, correct them in some sense. Like, for example, I've been talking to Renzo about transcribing his presentation on the schools. And I think when we get to do this, I mean, when we start doing this, eventually we will discuss, and there will be points where we have to go some way or another. And I think it's a form of looking back that could, I think, deal with the problem of having presentable objects, but objects that in a sense, they are good for us, because I don't know about you guys, but I think there's an advantage in regards to text, at least for me, because it's way easier to do an overview on text. I mean, a bird's eye view of what happens in a text than what happens in a hours long, like 300 hours of footage. I mean, since we don't have yet the trained GPT-3. So I think if we do an effort to get back to some instances that interest us and try and work back on them, I mean, not you doing your own presentation, but doing someone else's, it could be a way to establish new connections between members of the group, because you'll be working in smaller groups, and I think that will strengthen the overall group. And I also think that it will give out a product that it's useful for the group, it's useful for outsiders, and it also is something that's not gonna make us do anything new. Like, I think that the effort of the Atlas is incredible. I mean, I'm really in love with it, but I also think, in a sense, it's a bit of a trap, because it seduces us to keep coming back to it in a way that it may crystallize our efforts. So I think people who've been talking to me have seen how much Sergio Ferro pilled I've been, and he has. I'm sorry, Gabriel, and Renzo, because I was also talking to Renzo about this today. But there's something very good that he says that I think it's a nice trap to be aware of, because he says that in architecture there was this split between the drawing and the construction, where in the beginning the drawings were made inside the construction and according to the needs of the construction, and there's a tendency that will make the drawing exit the building site and become a normative force. And I think, in a sense, when we are doing these efforts of looking back, I think there's a trap that we may get stuck on ourselves if we look too much back, at least at these grand structures such as the Atlas. So I think it's an interesting, my suggestion as like something that I think can be done in the group in many ways is maybe try and do small work groups that are done like according to interest in a certain presentation, because I do think that it's something that will make us like produce new things, not just look back, but because I was thinking about this because I was thinking about the differences between transcribing, for example, Gabriel's presentation in the new school and Renzo's presentation, because Gabriel's presentation is like one person talking and talks, and then it finishes. But our group presentations, they are not like that. They're interrupted all the time. Then someone says something, and then there's also a work in progress factor that I think is very interesting. And I think it's not something simple, because it's not going to be a simple transcription, it's not like just getting the text and working it out and organizing. It's more like deciding things about something that's a bit open. And I think that can be productive for the group as a whole, because I think it will move us forward. It will give us the synthesis that we're lacking, but we won't have to do a heroic synthesis like Gabriel does time and time again. We can just do like small syntheses that are locally, and that in a sense, it will help construct the bigger picture without us having to like, oh, let's do one big plan and see what we've been doing. I think it's more ingrained into what we are already doing in a sense.
Yeah, I really like what you're getting at, Rafael, because I think it becomes a sort of a, like the working group format in particular, it's something that I think it can be really powerful for actually like engaging with small slices of what we have done and actually like stretching them like to the maximum that we can, and like overstretching and showing and like, and perhaps finding out something that like we wouldn't find out by ourselves because of time also. Like, because we all like, we don't meet all together like as much as we want, and like sometimes we can find different affinities for like particular things, and we cannot really compartmentalize like the at least not anymore, like the STP from what we do outside of the STP. And I say that with a very practical example. For example, in CPC, for example, which had me and Jean, who was also here, like there was always the talk of like, we were always relating to that in a way, you know, like we were relating to the framework in a lot of ways, and like we were relating to it, and there was some sort of like labor of coming back to what was consolidated over there, and also bringing some other people that were like randomly not that much into that part, and like explaining them and sort of like trimming small bits and pieces from what was appearing. So I think that this is a good idea. One thing that I wanted to know also, because I know you guys worked with that before, if because of course there is an automatic way of having a transcription of like having that, but if wouldn't it be the case that actually people presenting not only try to bring other people to present with them or even do somebody else's presentation, but also like that they sort of like respond to it in a way, and like responses can be either critical or like not that critical, or just like endorsing or bringing the same issue from another perspective, you know. And I think that this, because that reframes how the presentations happen, and also like sort of could perhaps become a way of having some very synthetic output of what has been discussed into a presentation. Because of course, for the presentation, we can always like, you can always see the person talking in video and everything. But like, if you have sort of like, if you make some sort of a thread from there, even if it's like topic based, it doesn't need to take that long. I think it makes also the job of synthesizing much easier and much less heroic in a way, you know, like it becomes much more like trimmed down, which I think is a welcome addition to what we do, at least. Like this is something I was thinking about, like when I was crafting when I was talking about the presentation about Rodrigo Nunes, for example. I think it would be bringing, not only like bringing people that were together, so Renzo that had an interest in the book, Jean also who read it with me, but also like bringing people within the group perhaps that encounter that book in another way and to respond to that presentation, so they don't have to like, perhaps they don't have the time to pull the burden of actually like participating on making the presentation as such, or like talking outside of it. But then when things are there, as they are interested in that particular question, they can just come and like craft something like it could be like half a page or something like that, just brings what were the questions and what those questions in relationship to what we have done could bring in a way. Like what where do our eyes after that presentation go, like when we read, like when we see that presentation, like how does that, like how do we see our framework after the presentation, and where does it fit, if it fits, if it doesn't, is it like an extra type of things that it covers, does it stretch in a way that it seems to fit or not. And like I think it's a sort of a, yeah, I don't like to use that like self-critical word very much, but it's definitely a sort of, yeah, self-reforming, self-reviewing procedure, I think, that helps to consolidate what we have done. And I think we have to think about a framework that would be not too labor intensive for it, but also that would like distribute, because it might seem like a lot of work for like 1 week, but then we have to think also about the work we have every now and then of actually consolidating everything. And perhaps that those little amounts, like that little amount of discomfort in that week of like, okay, I have to come up with, I have to respond to that presentation, so I have to communicate a little bit with the group that is doing it. It could actually, like in the long run, it could be worth a lot more than we think, I think.
I just wanted to say something, which is the same thing I said to Reza when he proposed that, you know, he identified a real issue, but then I had the impression that he proposed like a solution that relied too much on like a formal change, because I have the impression that this is not the first time that many good ideas come up, but then they simply don't happen, because on paper they're all very good ideas, but they don't really start from deciding that they're good ideas. Like that's not the first step to get them implemented. Like, for example, nothing prevents exactly what you said, Rafael, from having happened before. Like, why didn't no presentation simply, somebody was presenting, invite someone else to respond? Like, nobody needed the authorization of the group, but for some reason that doesn't happen, right? Or why didn't anyone else try to synthesize a part of the research? Like those things are not, it's not like there was a law against it, so that we need to pass a protocol for it, right? So I totally agree with it. I also agree with the idea of self-reforming, this reflexive, retroactive thing. I agree with all of it. I just have the impression that, like, I'm not sure if it's just a wrong intuition, but I have the impression that the best we can get out of talking about these things is just lowering the anxiety of trying things out, like making sure people feel authorized to try these things out. If you guys think it's a good idea, let's just try it. And I think that's more what's missing than like a particular structure that we need to implement as a general rule, that if we add that thing, then things might become more visible to ourselves, what we're doing, or we might like, because ultimately, if you stop to think about it, exactly what you said, which I think is a perfect idea, could be our next meeting. Like it could have spontaneously appeared, like, guys, I think looking back at the atlas from the perspective of what I'm studying, I have this issue that I wanted to raise that I think might shift something. But I think that, you know, we're working far away from each other. The level of connection between people in the group is very uneven, like at a personal level. So let's say the background chat is very specific, who talks to who and things like that. So looking inside the group, it's quite obscure what can be done and what cannot. And it feels, you know, like what I mean, like I have the impression that there's something to do with this kind of, which also I think is behind what Reza was saying, like, seems like some organization is missing, but when you stop to think about it, like having a list of topics, giving a big picture, like those things are kind of available, but still they don't happen. So I'm playing the devil's advocate in saying like, it wouldn't be the first time we have a lot of good ideas, but it's hard to kind of, you know, put them to work. I think that the thing Rafael said about, like, if somebody's interested, because there is personal reasons to be interested in, you know, co-authoring a text and publishing it, like there's other good reasons to be interested in this. If somebody does this, and it might spark a nice kind of backstage or parallel conversation. Like, honestly, from everything, I mean, it might be too nerdy, but the only formal problem I see behind everything we said is that research connections are partially ordered, but meetings are totally ordered. So we have one meeting after another, but research interests are like a weird lattice thing. So you need to project this into this straight line, and then we miss all these connections that are happening between, but they're mediated by personal ties and WhatsApp conversations, or, you know, somebody recalls something that somebody else said, and they're kind of lost. They don't get to be kind of captured by this, and a website won't do the trick because it's still removed from our meeting structure. Honestly, in the perfect world where we all have grants to do this sort of thing and free time, obviously we shouldn't have one meeting per week. We should have like different strands, and then like have meetings that are meant for unifying things, or you can go to what you prefer. You're not obliged to see everything, but you know, like probably something like this would help to make visible that there are many strands, and you can then see like what's a partial synthesis, what's a larger synthesis. We only have like total envelopes, right? We cannot have like this partial synthesis of the stuff we do. I think that all the solutions we're trying to propose, they try to mend that problem in one way or another. You know, like how you come up with a reading group is going to hijack the time of other people. You present something in the past, it's kind of lost and interpolated with a bunch of unrelated stuff that is hard to see the connection, right? If on Monday people are presenting the more formal stuff and dealing with political case studies on Thursday, suddenly some order of the ideas is already structured in the order of the meetings, but we lose totally that. And then our personal interests that we talk in like offline, those are the places where we actually get to capture those kind of traversal connections a bit. So I had the impression that there's an organizational mismatch between composition and intelligibility right now, which I don't know how to solve because we have limited resources, you know. I think Zulit was meant to address that a bit, but it's failing because it's, again, written intensive, you know, we need to dedicate time there. It's not the same thing. It's not like a place where you go to chat with your friends. So, but I feel like that's kind of the background problem in a way. For example, one thing that's happening, if we use the Badiou meetings every other week, then there is all these other meetings, like the idea of having newcomers presenting. We're not going to have many open slots for that, right? And I think like Michael hasn't presented, Median hasn't presented. I wonder if John is not interested in talking about his own interests for a bit. And I think that what the Atlas did do, and perhaps that's what Reza intuited, is that the Atlas is a weirdly non-linear tool, right? It was weird, for some weird reason, we managed to come up with an object that captures that kind of lateral connections a bit better than the meetings. So it was good to organize the meetings around it for some time. Like it made something intelligible that during the meetings, it gets lost, right? I don't know, like perhaps we could even divide meetings into always having two presentations. Like that could be something that introduces a bit of parallel action onto the serial thing. But I don't know, I'm just saying that I have the impression that behind all these really cool ideas that I totally am in for, whatever you guys feel like we should do, I'm all up for it. But I have the impression that there is an organizational problem deep down that has to do with this mismatch. I'm not sure if you guys feel like that happens a bit, you know?
Yeah, that's really helpful what you were saying, because it made me really think about, first of all, because it seems, I think that the Atlas is the first time in which we sort of, perhaps we really are able to visualize through it this sort of what you have called like a lattice of interests. And then I think, and if you look at it from that perspective, it's only natural that right now we are like, that this has emerged many times after the Atlas, that we are talking about like the format of the meetings and of like what could one do or not do in the meetings, because I think that what we're trying to do is in fact like the matching of one thing to the other. So I totally agree with you in that sense. I think that this really hits, like it sort of hits the nail in the head of what we were discussing and like what we were talking about. But then like I'm not what is my question perhaps is like, how do we go on about it, like from this sort of conversation? Because one of the things is actually like it's the totally like legit urge of like, yeah, let's simply like because all these things could have been done before and they could have been happening, and like they have been immersed in different places. And I think that each of the talks actually like it just helps us sort of like to ease the anxiety of starting it, which I think is a really good thing. And but the other thing is, if there is nothing actually in the framework of the meetings that should be structured, at least initially, like because what you said, for example, like on the presentation, like on having 2 presentations per meeting instead of 1. I think it's a really good thing. It's a simple, it's something that puts like a simple structure within a meeting, and it puts us with like other commitments that we have to stick to, like for example, of making room for the other person to present. So like presentations are cut, like are much more compacted in terms of information, and they have to be there, and it generates like all sorts of different challenges, but it is a fundamentally like it's a fundamentally different way of crafting the presentation as such, you know. Lucrecio is going with his input also, but
he wants to comment as well.
Yeah, but because I have the feeling that precisely this structure of the meetings is what should be not really enforced, but I think discussed and really like trimmed down in a way, because right now what we know about the meetings is that like at least what I know like of a meeting is that it happens on Monday, it relates to the group, it has to relate to the group in some of the ways, and this can mean whatever, like this could mean a reference to the atlas, to a specific thread that has been followed, and that it usually takes I don't know, 2 hours, like 2 hours something, and it has questions at the end, and it starts with the person's presentation. And I think that's usually because that's sort of the implicit structure that has evolved from the things, right? And but I think that if we shift, if we experiment with it like otherwise and say, okay, like what if we try to do like other presentations and try to like schematize them in another way. I think it could be a helpful, like it could be a helpful thing, precisely because it could refer to that mismatch that you're talking about. Like because then it doesn't become the sort of like what are the other ways in which we could be better with like ideal resources or everything, but it puts a very concrete problem, like how does our meeting structure can translate into the lattice of interest better than it does, or better than it did, or with the questions that are opened by the atlas. And I think that's a really good question that I have no idea.
I still think that, I mean, if we don't, let's say we don't want to make major changes, I mean, I think we should also cover the other, it's connected, the other problem, which is writing the text for present critique. But let's say the conservative solution, in my opinion, would be I would call it like a change of subjective emphasis, like on 2 points. Honestly, I would say I would try to, let's say, call upon the aspects of our agreement on what a meeting is that are kind of the low-key ones right now, and de-invest from the previous central one. Like from those 3 things we mentioned, like choose the meetings, choose the topics you are personally connected to, amongst them something that is kind of generally connected to the framework, and then try to compatibilize it with other people's presentations. I think the other 2, the second and third ones, are the weaker ones, and the first one is the main one. Like we're usually caught up in the tension between the first and the second commitment. Like, what is it that I like that is connected to this big picture? And then it's always like, okay, it's never enough, I should study more, or who gave me the big picture? And then you try to see what someone else did, and then you try to kind of measure against it, and that will make you, you know, if you're starting discussing with a group, it will make it look like everyone is on the same page but you, things like that. I have the impression that yeah, exactly, the pre-meeting neuroses. Yeah, I think that the most conservative solution that I would try is just shifting the axis of investment into the other points, in 2 senses. One is rather than making sure you connect to the big picture, make sure your private interest connects with whatever it is that someone else presented. Like it could be one meeting, you know, because that already will, but like to the point of saying you almost cheat, like, oh, holy shit, I have no idea what my interest in large cardinals has to do with this fucking group. Let me go over the old meetings and find one that has anything to do with it. And then I'll justify it in this way, like just cheat code. That doesn't matter, it will work either way. And then I think that the other principle that is crucial, which I think it's the hardest thing to do in the world, because I think it goes against most principles of kind of research, which is to measure the speed of progress by the one that's lagging behind the most. So, I mean, to make yourself responsible for talking about something you like, that you justify by connecting with at least one node in this lattice rather than the whole thing, right? But then the whole comes back when people have questions because they have no idea why you're presenting that here. And then you need to kind of, but then you can freely associate to understand how this thing fits with the other stuff. It can make it less formal because you don't need to give like a big presentation like the one Renzo gave or the ones that I do, you know, like it's okay to do something that is more free, has more of a free form. But I have the impression that if we find like a collective culture where we can give a bit more of emphasis to what people are not understanding as what guides the conversation, and second, to the local connection to at least one other point in the lattice, rather than, you know, this big picture thing. Because I think the big picture, the problem with the big picture, if you're not here for a long time, is that you think the big picture is the chronological meetings, like 300 hours. Whereas the big picture is just the synthetic point of view of a very weirdly ordered set of ideas. Sometimes it's actually much more restrained than it looks, right? I mean, like pretty much recently we summed up with a crazy ass triangle. Like it seems to be the most synthetic thing we could find, right? So I have the impression that the conservative solution would be, let's say, the level of just, which is where usually problems of the finite and the infinite are solved, right? Which is at a subjective level, like just imprint the right momentum, like emphasis on the compatibility between local meetings, and try to force a culture where if somebody's not understanding, that's allowed to be what guides the conversation, you know, rather than I'm going to go over everything I said I would prepare. I would say that, yeah, that's the perfect t-shirt. So I don't know, I have the impression that if we don't want to change anything right now, if we try to make that difference emphasis, and then probably the meetings would start looking different. We could test to see if people start feeling like, okay, you know, the task of connecting, synthesizing a bit things becomes like already automatically, organically starts addressing what you were saying, Rafael, like, you know, taking a slightly different view at something that already was presented. You can, for example, somebody made a presentation on Lacan. You hate Lacan because you're a Deleuzean. So you're just going to connect with that thing, right? I'm going to talk about Deleuze because I hate Daniel Tutt's presentation on Lacan. Like that would fit all the criteria, right? And it goes, because my worry, and you guys know I'm a bit skeptic about some of the self-reform, auto-reflexive kind of, it takes a lot of work for a collective form to revise itself. Like there is no total view, seeing the total view and then redoing it, you know? Like I think that it's probably going to be like this weird subjective change of emphasis that slowly we're going to see that we are in a new place, rather than having a clear view of, we installed a protocol, it allowed us to self-revise what we're doing, and we managed to redescribe a totality, you know? And of course, there is the ultimate cheat code, which is to just do what I do, like pretend like you're summarizing stuff, but then you're just selective and talking about the things you like. But it's a way of connecting with a bunch of stuff, right? So I don't know, I think that that's the conservative way of changing. Then I think that there are the more advanced ways of changing the group, which have to do with changing meeting structure, having projects to kind of, they can be very different from time to time. Like, for example, Daniel gave us this idea of presenting the atlas as a workshopping the atlas through his study groups of psychoanalysis and politics. And I was talking to Caron before the meeting started. We thought of, for example, what if everyone who wrote the atlas, we do like a little lottery, and in the workshop we present another person's section of the atlas, you know, as if it's our own. Like clearly I wrote this because I was thinking this and that, and like then you are the coordinator. So like we could come up with projects that also fit that kind of address that sort of problem, you know. Definitely, like I think that there is a lot of stuff to do there, but I would definitely not kind of go over this initial thing, which is, I think there is a bit of a weird culture that we need to just uphold it, like, and try to kind of keep ourselves in check and make sure it works, because part of it, I think, it's always going to be there. Like, it's always going to be a bit subjective, you know. Russia. Yeah, nobody wants to get the topos open problems in topos theory chapter.
I have something to add, and I really love that Gabriel was saying the word culture a lot, because I do think there's a culture issue in the sense,
you know, it's because I'm seeing the Steve Kerr.
yeah, this is like Steve Kerr all the way. Like,
I'm watching the Warriors coach interviews. Yeah. So
Gabriel is being our Draymond Green. He's like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, but he can shoot. We can see his synthesis. He can shoot. But I think there's a culture issue in the sense that I think a lot of these problems will work themselves out if people are more open to presenting. And I don't think there's a shortcut for that. Because I mean, I think Rafael, John also mentioned, I mean, there is a pre-meeting neurosis, but I think there's a something that's before that. People don't even schedule the meetings because they are already afraid of.
It's a pre-meeting fantasy. Yeah,
and I mean,
before the anxiety.
Yeah, everybody's stupid. It's okay. I mean, it's all right. Nobody's going to I mean, not, at least not here. You're not going to be no bad thing is going to happen. But I do think that we have to, if there is some voluntaristic or some heroic effort to be done, it has to be done in this specific thing, which is just present a fucking meeting and don't think about it too much. Even like, because I think this is maybe I'm the Draymond Green. Gabriel is the Steve Kerr, and I'm just yelling and stuff. I mean, we all know ourselves. We know, I mean, a lot of people here have previous relations or are establishing relationship. So we know that many people here have stuff to present that it's already ready. It doesn't have to be anything new. And I think it makes a whole difference after you present a part of your work, because that's when you see that the other people, they are stupid as you, in the sense that they do not understand what you're talking about. And that's why we are here. I mean, the best way to I think this is the best way to feel that like you don't have to be so worried is when people ask questions and your reaction is, this person did not understand a word of what I was saying. And this, I think this is very, I mean, it lifts off a weight, because I mean, you're seeing people present topos theory in 1 week, and then in the other week, they can't understand what's the topos theory of your specific research. And I do think it really lightens up, and it really helped me a lot. I mean, to just, okay, I'm going to present this shit and okay. And because I think it's a two-way. I mean, I think it's two different things that you'll get. First, you will see that, as French people have already know, like, I mean, that's what the ignorant master is. Everybody's stupid. I mean, the equality of intelligence is also the equality of stupidity. So, but I think in a sense, first, it's okay. You will feel like the other isn't as bad as you thought. And the other thing is that I think it will be clear in a way that is not possible to know before. What are the actual effects of other people's opinions on your work? And I think this really helps a lot. I mean, we've been one of the points that we have on this meeting is about the new people. And we've talked about it, that we should like one of the rules that we want to enforce is new people have to present something. And I know that already starts up, I mean, a lot of neurosis, oh, what I'm going to present. And I think we need to enforce this rule a bit more, because I think it will help the mood be lighter in general, the more people present. It's not something also for the person, it's also something for the group, I think. And so I think we should see how we could enforce this without being too harsh, of course. I mean, one idea we had was like, you have to set a date. It doesn't matter if it's in 6 months or if it's in the next month, but you have to set a date if you're a newcomer. I mean, you'll be free to set, and then all the social pressures will make it so you don't propose to present in a year. I mean, that will just look bad. But I do think that having a date and having a commitment, I mean, a constraint, if we speak on the language of the group, it will be good for the group in general, because I do think that we won't solve, I mean, I do think that a lot of the problems that we have, we are working out our neuroses collectively. And the solution is not talking about it more. I think it's just doing more presentations and stuff. Okay, the Draymond Green out.
Renzo is clearly Jordan Poole.
Shooting from the middle of the field.
Yeah.
that was fantastic. I still can't believe he'd made that shot.
You need to follow the NBA finals, Renzo, otherwise you're gonna miss the reference. John, I didn't understand your last point, like the ultimate voting.
I just mean, like, when voting is not the right word. I would just say metric would be better. Is participation, who shows up, that indicates like the actual intersection of interests and you know, where to go in the future.
I see.
Right? Like, if a lot of people want to continue to see topics going, they generally show that by showing up to meetings, bringing things from those meetings into chats or into Zulip and whatnot. And I think we have to have a way of indicating that, and then maybe figuring out ways to take work and make it more compelling, which is how, like, science, like, I feel like there's a lot of stuff from scientific research groups that we should be thinking about, and not just kind of generic theory, in the sense of like there are things that I think are continually being relevant to a lot of other people's work, like the kind of stuff Renzo did, like the compositional point of view, like the work from the primer, that's connecting a lot of stuff. And I don't really know how to like frame that well, but like, we have to be able to metricize like what people keep coming back to, and not just like what individual people are kind of like finding interesting for themselves.
But don't you think that's a good topic for a meeting? Like, what are the things we keep coming back to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like, I think that is a place where we can start to also address some of the concerns Reza keeps bringing up about big picture stuff. Is like, what is it, not necessarily like a picture per se of the world that we have right now, or a picture of what we're doing, but what are the things that like we keep feeling like that's important, that made sense. I've been working like just in my experience, some of the things I've been working on around imperialism, so much has clicked since I've joined this group, and it's similar things that other people have said they click. Now it's very different research interests, but similar kinds of things keep making sense. What are those things? And I feel like that starts to make it tangible. Like, I've thought a lot about your comment on my presentation, Gabriel, about it being very glitch mobby or whatever, glitch, you know, like all over the place.
The original one.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of the way to cohere that is the stuff we keep coming back to, because that's the actual structure that we're like all kind of intuiting. Some people come like Pedro, who hasn't been coming as much, he was coming at it from linear logic, which is actually what makes a lot more sense to me than some of the topos theory, but they're talking about similar things from different perspectives. what are those things we keep coming back to? We all keep talking about type theories in different ways, or a lot of us do. Like, what are those things? What are the things that like about Bruce, I can't remember his name, but the ABC monster diagram, what are those things? And then how do we like write that down or keep track of that? What are the things we keep coming back to? Because obviously people are interested in certain kind of topics and certain kinds of ways of doing things. And that's why I think like the meetings with the big presentations, with the logic mapped out, keep pulling big crowds. And there's a reason that a lot of like the attendance of the meetings that are more free associative aren't as attended, right? Like they're not as big, they're not as dynamic. And that might be fine. Maybe we need to have different kinds of meetings, some that are smaller and more back and forth, and some that are more structured with larger, more lecture-like attendance rates. But I do feel like that, like people keep showing up for one kind of thing, even though we all keep saying, let's do another kind of thing instead.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on 2 points. One is that actually, I think it would be a really, really cool topic for a meeting, just to see like, okay, what is the kind of sort of toolkit that it seems would be good to be available for everyone. Even if we cannot solve it, of course, we cannot give introductory courses in all the topics that we're not even experts on, but if we could start kind of coming up with this sort of thing, it would be easier, for example, to know what is a good idea for an introductory course to do with Daniel at SGPP, that then we would have that available for everyone who joins. For example, imagine we do the course on the Atlas and we take care of making sure it's useful for later people who join our group to, by just watching this short course, coming to terms like with the basic stuff we think is useful, like the diagram, for example, right? Caron doesn't think it's a good idea, but
sorry, I was interrupted. I was laughing at some others.
Okay, so no, it would be a laughing. No, but I understand. Like
I was interrupted. Sorry.
No, don't worry. Like, so I do think that this is a really cool way of talking about synthesis as well, right? Just going over things that are getting repeated or that have been helping people out. Like we could just have an open meeting about this thing. I think it might be very surprising what it is. I don't think it will be any of the math, because every time we say this, we're actually thinking about pretty much Dennis, John, Yasha. Like not everyone lives the meeting like, whoa, type theory. Like it's actually a minority in the group that is interested in these topics, like actively. It's not that general, but it gives that impression because those are the people who are presenting more. And then I think this comes to the other point that John mentioned, which I'm not sure if this is the metric, because I think it's a very noisy metric. Like sometimes people cannot join because they have commitments. They are already only able to come like once a month. So that kind of gets in the way of measuring attendance as a signal of something meaningful. But nevertheless, I think attendance is a meaningful measure. And I don't think we ever spoke about the effect it can have on people who are starting to present things, but cannot count on the group. Like, the low attendance already signals to them like, yeah, fuck off, something like that. So, I mean, we should probably consider that as well. To the point that Dennis and I had a very crazy idea. I think I mentioned it more than once here, where I thought it was totally bonkers, so I never brought it up again. But you guys remember we had an idea that had to do with participation as a signal and kind of this partial ordering of interests, which was to create like a list of meeting ideas, and everyone gets some tokens, which are like tokens for participating in the meetings. And then you subscribe to the meetings you want to see. So we get a feeling for which meetings people want to see. So you can actually use participation as a kind of a price signal on if you want to change how you're presenting to get more people to attend. So we came up with a weird token system, which had a cycle and some crazy other properties. Could be implemented like with a spreadsheet, but it would be a way of trying to actually turn participation into a metric that is a bit more impersonal and tells you something you don't already know. But I think it's a very tricky topic. it looks a bit too much like the marketplace of ideas if you're not very careful on how it's done, right? It wouldn't be, so I even have a document here. If you guys want, I can send it to you, like the basic structure we thought of it. But I think it's, again, I mentioned the conservative transformation to the group, which has to do with, you know, the culture in the organization. And there is the hardcore transformation, which I think it's something like that, like a crazy token system for listing everything everyone wants to present. And then people sign into these meetings. The ones that go over a certain threshold of participants, they take place the date that they proposed, right? So it can even happen outside of Mondays. So if you say, I want to present something on Giannotti on a Tuesday. Well, if there's enough people who want to be there to see Giannotti on a Tuesday, they will use their token. And you get tokens because you presented, right? But I think that there is a bunch of issues with this, probably should be better thought of. But if you guys think that participation is such a strong signal, it's not that noisy, it is actually that meaningful, and it cannot be overcome in any other way, we do have some crazy solutions to propose. I do think, John, that this sort of thing is a bit more contingent than it looks, and that it takes two things. More presentations per person for people to start getting a feel for where you're coming from, and this sort of a democratization of this informal work of learning about what other people are doing and actually putting that reference in your presentations as well. You know, like this thing that Reza was talking about, that he wants some syntactic point of view. You don't necessarily want to do it yourself. Like, there's a reason why I think those meetings with that sort of kind of theme end up bringing people in as well. So even if we don't use the crazy token system, still, like, you can take participation as a signal that you need to change how you offer something, right? You can still Hayek your way out of this if you want, just thinking about demand and supply. But I do think it goes back to that subjective thing of the meeting neurosis needs to be kept collectively in check. Otherwise, you know, you're really anxious about presenting. The first time you do, or the second time you do, there are not that many people there. By the end of your presentation, everyone left, or there are only 2 people by the end. Like, and then you feel like, I'm not going to go through this again, right? So we can still help each other out with that, even if we don't come up with a crazy solution, I think.
I just want to add that I think that I think we don't have enough critical mass to see if there is such a shift in attendances depending on topics. I think there's an optical illusion. I think I tend to agree with Gabriel. I don't think the high math stuff is the thing that makes more people converge. I think that's simply an effect of these being the people that present more. And since them being the people that present more, they are more established in the sense that people know what they're going to talk about. There's already an ongoing construction. And I think if you present one time and then you never present again, I think there's okay, it's normal that people may be less interested, not because your work is worse, or not even because they are not interested in the topic. It might be just because I think there's different timelines in the group that we have to account for. There are people who are, so I don't think that we, at this point, maybe in the future that could be analyzed in this way, but I don't think at this point we have, we would be able to get a grip on these differences. But John, you're saying that you think that the work that is more like a presentation, a closed presentation, will attract more people than people who are work in progress.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically been my impression. I agree, like it's very, noisy and stuff, but it does seem like, I mean, it kind of makes sense too, right? Like it gives you something to work with. It gives other people stuff to work with for their own research. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying it's seems to be what like is actually working really well, is the fact that like more systematized work is helping other people do stuff with their work. Kind of like Raphael said about like it's getting harder and harder to separate his research from the stuff here. And like I insofar as I'm doing things, it's very similar in my experience. But like, so I guess my question wasn't so much about like math or anything else. It was more about like whether or not the free associative kind of like sessions are really what people seem most excited about, I guess. And maybe that's, again, that's could be just impressionistic or have limited data sets, but my impression has not been that it's the free associative. Like we have these meetings like we're having right now where we're figuring out what to do, and they're some of the most interesting and compelling, but they're not necessarily the presentations that we're talking about getting people to do, right? Like we're talking about getting people to present their research. And I do think there might be questions about like what this group could do to help operationally and kind of methodologically bring people on the same page as what a presentation looks like, or what people get excited about in presentations or something like that.
Don't you think that maybe, I don't know, this is something that I get a lot of pre-scheduling neurosis and also pre-meeting neurosis. So I think this is something that bothers me. I do think that the presentations in this group, many of them, not all of them, and I think that's something that made me a little bit late to the party. They are very well presented. They seem very closed off in certain sense, especially if you're a newcomer. But I think I wonder if the solution to this is just is multiplying the people who are presenting so different styles of presentation can appear. Because I don't think there's a shortcut to this. I mean, for example, I'm going to present something next week that it's something that I just fell in love in the previous week. So I'm no expert. I'm not going to do a hyper organized presentation like some of you guys, but I'm trying to do this because I do think that aside from bothering many people with this, and I want to bother you also, it's a sign of friendship. I also think that talking it with you guys, even if it's a work in progress, will help me understand what I can get out of this. So I do think that, and I wonder also if in these meetings, if we multiply them, they might become more popular because people will be more free to nitpick, since it's not a closed topic. I mean, if someone presents something that's all synthesized, of course I can use it, but I can't move it around. I can't present problems. I mean, this is something that I liked, for example, in Renzo's presentation. And it's one of the reasons that I want to go back to it and try and transcribe it. I think it's a very open presentation. He's very tidy, of course. It's very well structured. But I do think that aside from that tidiness of presentation, there is a lot of open problems there in the sense that it's more of a work in progress than something that I can incorporate. I think it's something that I can play with and talk about. And I do think, I wonder if it's not a contingent fact that, I mean, maybe it's due to the presentation styles, I don't know. But I do think that open sessions, things where things aren't so fixed, where things are more work in progress, I do think they are more fun because at least I feel more open to intervening and talking and asking questions, because I think that it seems that it's something that's more open to the whole group than something that, oh, I'm just going to present my research that I did by myself. I mean, I'm not saying you're saying that, but just trying to differentiate it clearly, at least in my head.
You know, like I love how these problems, they really kind of mirror these theoretical issues, because You know, when you're trying to construct out of local bits a global thing that you're not really sure what it is, it's very hard to tell apart what is contingent and what is, you know, subjectivized in this material. Like, it's true that contingently we have people like me who are obsessed with slides, you know, or people like Tenzo who have, I don't know what's crazy Figma thing he uses for those things, or, you know, like then it like, it's contingent. But once that contingency repeats enough and we don't have any counterexample, we never add anything that is kind of giving a counterexample that also fits the rule, it's hard to tell apart if that's the rule or if that's a contingent thing. And then you start trying to mimic it because that it looks like it's what's expected, and then it becomes like this engagement neurosis. I think that's very much the where it comes from sometimes, you know, like when you have a rule that you cannot tell apart what is contingent and what is necessary about it, because for contingent reasons, some repetition happened a couple of times, and then that looks like an essential part of it. And I feel like the only way to, exactly as Rafael was saying, the only way to test it is to purposefully do something different and see if it sticks. Now, just go and present, and you'll see that, like, if you just have no visual resources, it will work as well. And then once you have like 10 meetings like that, and, you know, my PowerPoint meeting is an exception, then it doesn't look like that's the standard you should be measuring yourself against, you know? But it's hard because I think that for a while, there was this propagation of unnecessary constraints as being central kind of tenets of how to do things.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say that I think, yeah, finding new excuses to present, like different ones though, is sort of like a way to add yeah, richness to the kinds of like interaction and types of things we do. And it might create new problems, like being too, we might realize that it suddenly gets too chaotic, but we haven't had that problem yet. And so I think, yeah, like this moment I realized that there were really mathematical presentations that I wasn't understanding, and really like psychoanalytic presentations I wasn't understanding. There was no intersection between these ways of not understanding. Is like when you sort of like realize it's fine to be lost for different reasons, because and yeah, and then one thing I think would like the presentations for newcomers, I think is something that enriched sort of like kinds of presentations that we do. I think another one that will also create new like ways to also like test what we do is inviting people from outside. I think it's really something that if we're successful, we'll create new, very different ways to present stuff and sort of like revisit our ideas in different ways. So yeah, I think, yeah, well, also one thing I was talking to Rafael is on this topic of inviting people is thinking of ways of how to make exchanges, making this interaction also rich for both sides, like similar thing to this criteria of presenting, you know, such a way that's connected and such a way that the person who understands the least is still understanding something, like how to make like the presentations into like a two-sided interaction, not a simple like communication of stuff, is also like a good criteria to evaluate progress and value.
I think John wanted to say something.
Yeah. So I just wanted to respond to one thing about Rafael mentioned about like the idea that there aren't shortcuts and you just got to do it. And I agree, there is something like engagement wise, but I think this is, and this is an issue in like lots of organizations, not like activist wise. I think like what I'm talking about isn't necessarily a shortcut as much as it's what you need to do when you're not plugged into the informal networks. Like I don't talk to people outside of these meetings, they're like, and a lot of the like WhatsApp hasn't been really useful for me as far as like engage, like getting interest going. So just at what point, in my experience, if you want to get past informal networks, you got to formalize what the informal network is doing for the organization, which in this case is helping to take people's interests and getting them to a point where they're ready for presentation. I feel like that there's an economy of informal stuff going on, which is good. It's clearly, and it's interesting. It's a good, much better example than anything I've ever participated in, like taking seriously the democratic problems of this economy. Like, I think like that's why I keep showing up to these meetings in addition to theory. Like, I think everyone takes it very seriously and is cool about it, which is nice. But I still think that there are like methodological formalization things that can happen that aren't about the math. It's about the like, this is like the steps, like actual concrete steps to plugging in a meaningful way, and not just like intersecting. Because I mean, the intersections I've found in just my own life between my interest in this group, there's so many. I feel like so many people in this group have that, but there's a huge process of translation from that to like sitting down, whether it's with like an informal, I'm going to use a whiteboard, sketch things out in a back and forth dialogic fashion, or it's a much more presentational, like here's the summation of my research way. Like there's still either way a lot of formalization that's happening. And I don't know how much I'm a representative outlier versus not, but like I'm not an academician, so there's just like, I'm not part of a cycle that a lot of people are here, and I don't know how much we want to be plugging in non-academicians. But I think if we do, we want to take into account that people don't professionally get to talk about this with other people. Like no one at my work wants to listen to this shit. My roommates don't want to, right? Like this is the only venue for that. So how do we like, what does that mean? Because I think that this stuff could be super amazing for activists. Like there's so much here that I think like teased out in certain ways could really be like revolutionary. But I think participation for non-academicians, and I'm trained in a lot of this stuff, and it's still difficult simply because my day-to-day life is not a theoretical professional life. And yeah, so I just think there's a lot to tease out there, but basically like I think there are questions about what it means to participate meaningfully that can be formalized without it being about like, oh, you have to learn type theory, topos theory, blah, blah, blah. Like that's what I wanted to.
No, I totally agree, John. Like I really, really agree. That's also why I said, like, I mean, in a perfect world, again, we could even try to go in that direction if we thought it's time. I personally, I don't think it is. I think we're still kind of finding out what are the, like, we're surviving just long enough to learn about what are the crucial problems to be solved, like to make this a stable thing. So we probably should wait out until we learn more about these things before we commit, like look for funding to make this something where, you know, we get a bit more of structure. We could try that, you know. But regardless of that, I have the impression that exactly what you said, for me, honestly, this thing I call the culture, but I think it's pretty much the subjective kind of threshold right now. Like, I think that there's a kind of a network of informal conversations that goes on through, like, I'm not sure for you, John, but I have the impression that the meetings we had outside, the two of us, were the most meetings with other people you had here, no? Like outside of the meeting, of the main one.
Yeah, I met with Dennis one time before my first presentation, and that's, yeah, so like 3 or 4
Yeah,
meetings.
but like then, and then there are always meetings about like trying to, you know, find a common ground about some underlying idea so that it facilitates for you to do what you're doing. Like Renzo and I have done this, Rafael and I meet with Dennis all the time. I talk with Mike. I have the impression that that underlying network of, you know, kind of invisible meetings that usually are all about sharing interests, paving common ideas. Like they do a lot of work, you know, that if you just look at the public meetings, sometimes it's creating the transcendental illusion that which I really think is a transcendental illusion. It's the fact that once you have a complex tapestry of ideas, everyone who presents doesn't feel like they're responding to one presentation. They feel like they're responding to the totality. So you're always too small, even though nobody is that big, you know? So that neurosis, I think it's just an effect of being part of something big. We're not made in the measure of infinite things. So it looks like it's always too much. It's not easy to find a way to, whereas in these informal meetings, it feels like that's where a lot of the kind of parsing of these things and presenting them in an introductory idea. And then usually they are like somebody who's been here for a longer time meeting with somebody who's, you know, doing their first presentation. Like that whole structure already happens, but it's kind of invisible and it's not that democratized, even to the benefit of the people who have been here for longer, but would really learn what they know about the things they presented if they had a chance to talk informally with the newcomers and try to present it in a more kind of, you know, parsed out introductory way. So perhaps the mistake is also not only the thing, I mean, perhaps that's where this difference between this partially, like this lattice like structure and this totally ordered chronological meetings, that's where it's appearing, because this invisible set of meetings and chats and so on, that's where it's already kind of a big part of what sustains the group, you know? And the closer it is to somebody's presentation, the more that person tends to informally meet with others and talk and feel like, okay, now I need to learn about this and catch up. It's never in the public meeting, right? There is a kind of a semblance we keep in the public meetings that it can accumulate and make it look like it's almost like the resistance to present or to discuss things becomes much higher. So probably something in the way of what you said, like how to make this implicit thing a bit more explicit or a bit more kind of democratize it as a, you know, part of the group work, right? Probably it would be a solution, like something we need to think of. Probably not like a official thing we do, but definitely something that is, I'm not sure exactly how, like, for example, in Zulip, we could have something like just a classified to say, like, I wanted to understand better this thing that was presented in that meeting. So it's easier for somebody to come. Yeah, we're needing like a George Soros guy who just, you know, allow me not to work so much on this other stuff. But just to conclude, like, I find this very amazing that what John said, like, I wonder in the proportion here, how many people have academic jobs? I think it's actually a minority. People whose actually daily work is academic. Like, is it a majority? I don't think it is.
I think there are a lot of ex-academics in a certain
sense. There's ex-academics. Yes, there is unemployed academics and people who gave up on academia and people who are depressed about their academic life.
Because I think there are a lot of people whose work is sufficiently close maybe to academia that I think it maybe gives them an upper hand. I mean, I write textbooks, philosophy textbooks for school. So I'm outside, but I'm also inside. So, but I think most of the people here, they're probably on the outside, they are ex-academics. I don't think, I mean, I don't think it's the majority. But yeah, I do think that
Caron teaches. Some people are students, like Rafael.
Also to an unemployed academic, yeah.
Yeah, John is, yeah, I see that he's like, yeah, so like, it's weird because again, that transcendental illusion, when you get like a lot of top, I really think people miss, like, we have a very bad grasp of what real equality means. Like, when you get a lot of different people in a room, what you produce is this sort of thing. Like, there's always a good reason to feel bad because there's too much difference and it's not stratified to make you less anxious. Like, you know where things fit. Like, only grade 5 people need to know this. No, like, you put everyone in the same pot. But then at some point, somebody's going to say something you have no idea what it means. and you're going to say, fuck it. See, now I'm totally excluded of this group. But since there are many different things that somebody doesn't know, everyone feels excluded from something. And I find that we haven't really dealt with equality neurosis enough. Like people think equality is a solution. Equality poses really complex problems, not to produce this sort of uncontrolled effects, of, well, I'm the one who's not academic. After all, if Dennis presented on this topic that I don't know, and that guy, it creates this idea that there is this sort of group, that you're not in. But there's always a group we're not in this group, right? I mean, it's the funny thing. Like, there's always, I think there's always. Sorry, yeah.
I was just wondering if we could try something like, I mean, I don't know if this would make sense for schedules and stuff, but like just an idea of like, take the people that are regular participants, randomize into groups of like 3 or 4 people, and then have those people talk about interests. Because that way, instead of having it all funnel through, because a lot of people end up talking to you like I did, because it's like, okay, Gabriel's like kind of centralizer and connector. But I think that ends up creating the dynamic where also you become the person that is looking at everything, because everyone's kind of like talking to you about everything. And if we randomized it and like spread it out, then it would just kind of like connect people over time to talk about this stuff, and then kind of bring it back to the group through presentations. And also take off that intellectual workload from you as having to be the kind of like.
Yeah, because I mean, the only correction I would give is that it's not that people come talk to me. I go talk to people. Like most people don't talk to me like about their. I go and send a message. It's so nice that you came to the meeting. What are you working on? It takes work. Like it's not like naturally centralizing. I get so anxious that I end up doing these things that I try to, move it to other people, but it's complicated. I don't know, like perhaps like we need to be humble and go from like a spontaneous centralized to a non-spontaneous, partially decentralized. Like it's not gonna spontaneously become decentralized. So like a big brother system where, as you said, like select some people who help out newcomers with their first presentations, and then this sort of background will necessarily have to happen. For example, Miriam is trying Miriam and Michael are trying to run away from their presentations, their initial presentation. Like we could assign somebody to both help out, but also annoy them, like, hey, how about, what's keeping you? Let me help you,
It's the good Big Brother program.
Yeah, the something not like even that. I don't know. Yeah,
but I do think because there's this point that you mentioned, John, that I thought was very important, that there, and Gabriel said that it takes a lot of work for him to be the point of not connection, but to be an intersecting point. I do think that there's a very difficult thing, which is due to the fact that in Zoom meetings, we don't have boundaries. To take Renzo's discussion, we don't have those places that are in between where we are a bit more free to talk about whatever else, and which creates some connections. I don't think Zulip will do that. I don't think WhatsApp does that. I think that the only way we have to do this, I mean, because since we are all far apart and we can't all live in the same city, I think the only way to sidestep that is presenting. I mean, I'm going to insist in this because it's what takes least work, I think, least invention. Because just for example, I think I'm going to do I've been talking to Renzo, but it started in a way because we started meeting up in different groups. We're doing a reading in Portuguese of Karatani and there are 3 basic. There are like 4 people who are regulars. One of them is me, Renzo, Michael, and another person. And it's the 4 of us, so we end up talking more. So the connections, they are not created only because we have these boundaries, but I think as the more we expose ourselves, the more connections we can make. I mean, I'm being a bit too self-help like, but I do think it's a very important point, because the one you put, because I think that, and it takes a lot of guts to talk to people and to say, oh, I'm interested in what you're saying. Oh, I want to hear more. Everybody is shy. Everybody is afraid. I mean, I'm not saying you're saying that, but I do think there's a real structural problem here. And I think in a way, there's no, and I think one thing that helps is hearing people out. I mean, in a sense, I'm just going to say this because the first presentation I went, it was all topos theory. I mean, I use topos theory because you all like to say it, but for me, topos theory is anything that's math. But topos theory, it was all like Dennis and Gabriel, like pa pa pa, and I was like, what the hell is this? I want to sleep because I'm tired. I'm not working with this, and it was a very frustrating year for me last year. But then it was your presentation that I was like, oh fuck, this is something that makes sense.
And the one on Mongolia, right?
Yeah, it was like, oh, I think I even sent Gabriel a message saying, okay, this speaks to me in a sense. So so I think that I really want to, and I'm very curious about your work also. I mean, I think it would be awesome if, I think these channels, they are generated when we expose ourselves a bit too much, because thank God there are no grades here, there are no grants, there's nothing here, at least.
Thank God there's nothing here.
Yeah, I mean, we are like the empty set. This is the empty set. There's nothing here for us. So but I do think that it's something that, I mean, the more, because since we don't have these boundaries, like where we're outside of meeting and we're talking like this meeting sucks, and then we start like, you know, talking, I think it's something that you have to, I mean, you know, I love Plato, so I think we have to talk, and when we end up talking, we will end up going places where we can see before. And I do think that the only way we can sidestep this boundary, and I think that this is what may strengthen Zulip and other places. We won't be able to artificially make them a center of anything if this place isn't more diverse in the talking points, in the talking voices. So I mean, that's, and I think there are two simple ways. One is everybody talks. I mean, more. I mean, we do presentations. I think the idea of double presentation is nice. I like it. It's simple. And I also think the idea of bringing other people. I mean, Renzo has gone, but we are not just planning. I mean, because we always say, let's bring people from the outside. It's like, we're saying this forever. But we are actually, I'm trying to push Renzo because it's not me, it's Renzo, so he has to do the work. It's easier. So that's another thing of doing things in group. You can push other people because I'm going to do the Ferro presentation, and he's been trying to convince a friend who works in a school co-op to talk in the group because it deals with a lot of organization problems. So we're going to do, we're trying to talk about, maybe it's a two thing, like he comes and see the presentation and then he presents something with Renzo on the project. So it's another way to bring another voice, but that won't be pushing too much outside what we already do. Because I think, especially because most of us are ex-academics, para-academics, wanting to be academics, but not really on the stable side of things. I do think that we can't do anything that will require an extra effort. I mean, we do have to do efforts, but I mean, I do think that we have to do some sort of effort, but something that we are already doing. So I mean, come on, we're like 15 people. If each of us gets one presentation about something that they already know, I mean, their PhD, their masters, whatever, nobody's gonna know anything about it. If Michael talks about the problems of nationality, I think you will enjoy it very much, John, because I think there are lots of connect. So I think that's something that will make this group funner than it already is.
You know, I just want to throw it out there just because, I mean, like, I feel like the topic of, I mean, we totally blew it. We wanted to talk about the crisis and critique paper as well. Like, I wrote down everything we decided. I'm just going to send it to everyone afterwards. But this crisis and critique topic, I think we'll have to discuss it on WhatsApp. But just to throw it out there, something which it feels to be like the ultimate topic of the meeting is the fact that the unit of this group is not the Monday meeting. Like, the Monday meeting is not the thing that if you just cover our work with the meetings, you don't really cover what we do, because there's all these other things happening. Either like you need the atlas, which is a text to actually be able to see that there's some cohesiveness, or you need to consider these invisible meetings. And there is this big symptom in the group, which is quite interesting, which is that we kept the name that the group had when it was a smaller part of a bigger project, right? And the bigger project, which was the Circle of Studies of Idea and Ideology, it had a structure to solve that exact problem, because we had regular meetings which were meant to be always the big picture with a central material. So it was meant to homogenize heterogeneous people. And then had like more specific group interests were delegated to kind of parallel strands, right? With the commitment of bringing the results back to the central meeting afterwards. So like that structure actually addresses some of the stuff we're talking about. Like, we had a meeting that was always introductory. It was just kind of recuperating what we already done and getting notes, anonymous writings from people about what they didn't understand and addressing that directly, right? That was the regular meeting, was just associating people's questions back to this main framework. And every time some more specific, more in-depth interest appeared, we created a subset. So these coverings based on, you know, being at the same level of interest in something, or wanting to do a study group on Badiou, or wanting to do, you know, in-depth understanding of some mathematical thing, or you found a common interest with somebody, you want to delve into it in more detail, rather than being the invisible personal thing. That was the second order kind of groups we created inside the circle. And I don't know if that structure is not at some point like an apt thing to adopt, you know, because perhaps there's a bit of hypocrisy in what we're saying. My dog is going crazy. Perhaps there's a bit of hypocrisy in saying, I'm afraid my dog will jump out of the room. There's a bit of hypocrisy in saying that we only do the work for the Monday meeting, because what we ended up saying here a lot is that actually do a lot of side work that is just kind of covered up with our personal relations. Like, it's done out of pleasure, but actually there's a lot of more meetings happening, right? So perhaps there's something to, I don't know. I just remembered that this is a funny thing about this group, that we're discussing this problem, but there we did have a structure to solve it in a previous incarnation of the project, right? But just see if my dog just jumped out of the porch. Just 1 second.
Oh my God, he came out from the other side. That's like a movie. Gabriel went one side.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Yeah, that's like, I mean, he's playing with us, right?
Who? Sorry.
You went to the other side, and then Lucretius came from the other. It's like,
yes, but because my window, like the porch, you know how it is, right? From the window, you can jump to the porch. So he jumped through the window and then ran through the porch back into the room. Just scared the shit out of me. He's a bit crazy. So
that was like, it looked like a movie.
But I don't know, like I do think that there might be something in that old structure that at some point we might consider bringing back, just to, as John said, give a bit more of a contour to something that is happening like in an invisible level, and it had the benefit of, being more like, that's why it was called like a circle and the subsets, right? Subsets can form this partially ordered thing where you just get the intersections between some of the members and some of the interests. So you do get like this more tree-like structure where the way we're doing now, like the part we want to commit to together is way too just like linearly serialized, and it's hard to expect that people who are just jumping on the train are gonna be able to kind of accommodate all of this. So I don't know, there are definitely many things to think about, and I mean, most people left anyway, so it's probably better to discuss this when we have more people again. But I'm gonna just post all of these things, like just to make sure, if you guys remember, let me know if I forgot anything. Like, we have a schedule now that has your presentation, Rafael and Ferro, then my presentation, then Badiou starts on the 27th. Then Renzo and Rafael are presenting on Rodrigo Nunes on the 4th of July. Then Badiou again, then Caron's presenting, then Badiou again. That's as far as we went. So we don't know what we're doing the 1st of August. Actually, I already know I won't be here in the 1st of August. Is the day that I have that Paulo Arantes event about my book, so I'm gonna be nervous. Then for the Badiou group, we're going to start on Mondays for a couple of months, at least as long as we cover the intro, perhaps a prologue as well. And in the meantime, we're going to try to set up a different day. We're starting on the 27th. I'm going to talk to Daniel Tutt to tell him to seek John out to talk about perhaps hosting his other online group study on Immanence of Truths through the SGPP, which I think he will be really psyched to do. I'm waiting on, this is something we didn't talk here, but I was going to tell John this as well. I spoke to Agon about the possibility of publishing essays, like responses to Immanence of Truth, in Crisis and Critique. He was excited about it, but he said he had to kind of run it through Frank Houdin to make sure they can do it and when they would be able to do it. But I think that it's probably going to be also a yes. Then I'm going to talk to, I had the impression that people were interested in the idea of using the Atlas as the basis for a workshop with the SGPP as well, right? So just going to remember Daniel of this idea and see if he's still up for it, what format we could do it. So just get that ball rolling. Then the thing with the newcomer presentations, we will need to see if Miriam, Michael, well, I wonder if John is up for the challenge as well. John, I'm not sure how you are like commitment wise, but if you're up for it, we can just add you to our Zulip chat and like all the little kind of gadgets, and so you can like track the inside conversations as well, if you want. Then the only thing we ask is this thing, that if you are up for it, just whenever you want, like it can be like 3 months from now. No, yeah, it's really not like work intensive at all. Like, and then whenever you want, but just give us a date, like doesn't need to be now, but just so we can put on a schedule, like for whenever you want, like an informal presentation of the things you're interested in or you're working now. So it's easier for people also to take that into consideration when they give other presentations and try to, make themselves closer to your work as well. So I'll add you there. Then there is a crisis and critique thing. I'll just do a little post or a little text for the WhatsApp and the Zulip so we can talk about it. What we're gonna do with it. Like I'm personally of the opinion that we should use what you're doing, Rafael, and what Renzo is doing, like the transcription of his talk, and then we work together on top of that transcription to try to fit people's interest. Like something very simple like that. 10K is not that much. And Hansel gave such a thought-through presentation. Like it would be good to try to explore it a bit more.
Yeah, I think it's a good example of where we're going, even if it's not everything we're doing.
Yeah.
But
But anyway, let's see if anyone has another idea, like
yeah, but
perhaps somebody.
If I pretend that it's going to be this, it's also going to make me work on it sooner rather than later. So I think it's good that you're saying this, even if it doesn't turn out to be that.
Sure. John, yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to just throw on the proposal list to talk about down the road is and this ties into the thing about translations, is I think it'd be great if STB hosted a meeting for all the cool activist things you're connected to in Brazil in Portuguese. I would love to attend, assuming I would try to attend either way, but translation would be great if we could figure that out with the Google Translate. But I think that might be a good first step in like experimenting with what that would be like, and not having it be gringo centric. It'd be pretty cool. And then I'd also like in the stage, I totally want to support this idea for crisis and critique. I think it's great. I think it's a really good spot, and I would volunteer after the initial kind of condensation you're talking about if you want any editing on the level after that. Hit me up.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool, man. Like, because it's gonna need a lot of revision. Like transcripts are like, they're so hard to do. But I think that, for example, Medium, my newcomer presentations, I know Vito, who just joined recently, he left already, but he's like very, very engaged together with Renzo in the courier strikes here in Brazil. And I know that probably speaking in English is something that would be an impediment, like for him to feel comfortable. So we have like people just in the vicinity here of the group who already benefit, from trying this translating tools, see if they work. And I honestly think like we should probably kind of raise our tolerance to kind of clunky meetings, to the sense that, for example, I wouldn't mind translating as people speak. Like, for example,
that's beyond clunky, I think, personally. But okay, I'll be there. But
yeah, why not? Like, how bad can it? I mean, if there's no other way, like, I think that the issue is that it can make people embarrassed. Like, okay, in my presentation now there needs to be a translator. Like, if there isn't a sense that it's to make somebody more comfortable, if they get less comfortable because of it, then I think it's a problem.
I mean, I would be willing to sit through a meeting if you were translating in the chat, for example, like, so someone's talking and someone's typing as they go, and it doesn't have to be 100%. Like, I'm not going to pretend I understand the entirety of the math presentation. So why do I need to understand the entirety of the Portuguese, right? Like,
but for example, I've done this before, like, but not through like Zoom or something. But for example, we can open a Zoom meeting and a Google Meet meeting only with the audio in the Google Meet, and then only people who want the translation are on the Google Meet. So I mute my audio here, but I translate like on top of the person speaking, and you guys have only the Google Meet audio on. So you get the English translation. The person who's speaking in English doesn't need to stop, in Portuguese doesn't need to stop. We just kind of agree on a slower speed, Like, we can come up with solutions. I just think that we need to kind of be a bit more kind of active in trying these things out, because otherwise I think that at some point the embarrassment needs to shift. Like, people who are lagging behind need to make others embarrassed rather than the inverse. Like, that's, I think, the crucial thing, both for not knowing some technical thing or not feeling comfortable with the language. Like, we need to find a way to turn this from like a invisible in-between problem we solve case to case into, like, again, the organization's culture. I'm sorry, I'm really into the reading about the Warriors now and their organizational culture, and I'm adopting this terrible term.
That's the preface to the next atlas right there.
I honestly am thinking about giving a presentation on like Steve Kerr organizational strategies, but I just can. I think it's a bit too much, perhaps.
No, it's
perhaps
not.
one day.
It's not. I think it's something that's very. I mean, seriously, sports is one of the places where organizational issues arise all the time. So I think.
Yeah, I mean, why we're gonna talk game theory? We're not talking about some games. Like, we should probably be a bit more bolder about.
No, yeah, I really do think. I mean, I'm not just joking around. I think if we can talk about this. I'd be interested in doing. We could do it as a fun project, maybe. Not setting the bar too high. I think maybe we could try and think something that's fun for the group. Also, it could be also a moment of.
Yeah, I mean, we still have that The Wire idea in the back pockets that we haven't really explored. I'm really thinking of proposing that. I'm just not sure if I tried to Daniel's group or if I tried in Portuguese, but I still haven't given up on the idea of our interdisciplinary The Wire. Oh,
by the way, the other day by accident we put The Wire on in with Brazilian voiceover, and it was just what you would expect. It's like a bad police cop movie with everybody with a phony voice. I really recommend just putting any episode.
Oh, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna watch 5 seasons with the Brazilian.
No, yeah, I think I want to do another rewatch just in the background with everything in Portuguese. But I'm sorry, people. I just too much in love with The Wire, and I'm rewatching it.
Such a good show.
Yeah, man.
I was also gonna say, have you all heard of We Own the City?
Oh,
yeah, I finished watching it now.
It's like The Wire Part 2. So,
yeah, it is literally The Wire. I think it's Wire Part 3 because The Deuce is Wire Part 2, in my opinion. Like, that's my hot take.
Oh, really? I haven't seen The Deuce.
Dude, oh my God, you need to see it. Like, clearly there are 2 big problems with The Wire, right? One is, I mean, there are no female characters practically. And then The Deuce addresses that because it has exactly the same kind of, both kind of studies the same object like a city, but does it from the standpoint of prostitution, the porn industry, and so on. And then the other problem is, of course, like the representation of the police. You know, it doesn't, I don't think it works so well with the current kind of social imagination. And then you have We Own the City tries to tackle that, I think, but I think it's much less successful than The Wire. Like, if I don't know, I had the impression it doesn't matter. Like, it has this weird effects that The Wire didn't do. Like, didn't do flashbacks, didn't do some solutions that I think. I mean, the fact it's a real story as well. I think, I don't know. I don't think he was as successful, but I really loved it. Did you finish the last Atlanta season?
Yes.
Fucking hell.
Atlanta is better than Twin Peaks. I think it's better than David Lynch, in my opinion, which is, I think, high praise.
Yeah, it's really high praise. I must say, I was a really big I am a really big Lynch fan, but yeah, there's something there. I think I agree with you. I was really amazed by it.
To give that judgment.
And did you realize that the last? I mean, I can't really talk about it. Like, I'll message you later. But the last episode has the structure of a David Lynch movie. With the whole, you know, like, I can't say that people didn't see it. Like, there's too much spoilers in it, but it's definitely like clear proof that they are explicitly kind of going into his terrain and just owning it.
Yeah, the one in France, right? The one in Paris.
Yeah, the one in France, yeah. And I mean, I love, yeah, I mean, this is actually, okay, this is actually something we should, I mean, we did contribute in our group to, you know, aesthetic and art criticism, because we did come up with an original thesis about David Lynch. I still think it holds. That idea that in David Lynch, everything that pertains to mode B and C becomes metaphysical, right? There is no institutions. Like, every time you have an institution, behind the institution, there is just like something otherworldly. You only get like family structures. The police is like it's actually like bureaucracy is kind of idiotic communities, like it's very weak communities, and everything that pertains to economy is just like metaphysical decisions, you know, like when the mafia decides they want to cast a girl rather than another, it's like this weird voice from beyond that chooses the girl, right? Just he never gets to portray this other level. And I think that it's like the relationship between Twin Peaks and Atlanta has a lot to do with that. How do you maintain how do you still make an institution abstract but situated? Whereas with David Lynch, institutions are abstract to the point of being nebulous and kind of like open up to some metaphysical realm. In Atlanta, you have that feeling like institutional racism is not about people. It's this vibe, but it's still situated. It's not like a metaphor to the other realm, right? So we do have, I think we do have reasons to do
I think
Atlanta appreciation.
You know, just because we were talking about this, I do think that this will be part of maybe the discussion on Sérgio Ferro next week. But I was wondering if Atlanta isn't a good case object for applying Sérgio Ferro's model to another medium. If you can think Atlanta production-wise, in a sense that it links its aesthetic solutions and how it deals with this abstract racism. But
yeah, no, I think it would be a good, interesting thing. The only movie after we talked about this that I recalled that has it. Have you seen the documentary about Apocalypse Now and how it was made?
No.
Yeah, I think it's a good example of production constraints affecting aesthetic constraints in that particular way that Ferro is interested. But it's very hard to find examples, I think. But yeah,
but
anyway,
I think that's yeah.
Let's definitely meet on this.
We should, yeah, let's just schedule some. Yeah, exactly. But I thought you were very, very bold in your very polemic statement about Atlanta and Twin Peaks. I'd like a meeting with just that statement to begin with. Like, prove me wrong. Yeah.
That can be one of the free association meetings.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the crisis and critique thing, I'll just ask there in our group, see what people say, right? We can't really decide now, right? Was there any other topic left to go over? If not, right?
I think that's a wrap, maybe. I mean, I think there are issues that we didn't discuss because I don't think we settled on the first topic, but I don't think that's going to be settled theoretically. Like, at least that's
the journal outlet thing, right?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
The SGPP thing, it depends on Daniel. The CC tax, I think we can discuss it on Zoom. I would suggest also that we hammer it out, or I mean, decided that the going-ons of the Immanence of Truths groups be on Zulip. I mean, I think that's going to filter out who's interested or not, and it's fine. I mean, yeah. I think that has to be a part of it because it will be too crowded in the WhatsApp.
Yeah, WhatsApp is not. Yeah, I'm doing the same thing with the crisis and critique text.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's we can use Zulip for those kinds of things. I mean, if you want to do the stuff, it's good. I think that's all of it. I mean, we did hit on most points, I think.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I mean, okay, no, I'll bring this up on Zulip. Some other thing. Okay, forget about it. That's not. It's already. Yeah, no, sorry. It's just because John said that thing about yeah, exactly. WhatsApp is for Monday meetings and memes. Yeah. By the way, nobody has created any new stickers for our bibliography. But what I was gonna say is that, I just tried this thing with Daniel where we did like a mix of a podcast with WhatsApp audio messages. Like he sent a message, I would send him one back. It's very easy to kind of integrate it into your day because you don't need to schedule it. You can, if you don't like what you recorded, you can re-record it. Audio messages actually have very good audio. And then we just put them on a timeline and we created like it looked like one of those lo-fi videos for studying where you put some random images on top. But it's a format that I think really worked for like 20-minute long conversations and many episodes. I think that could be a very easy format to do. Yeah, like it's like platonic dialogues in the age of audio messages. Like, Socrates says something and then it takes like 3 days for somebody to listen to his audio message. And then somebody just responds like 3-second audio, like, whoa, Socrates, that's amazing. And then he continues. But
by Zeus,
exactly. But this really worked. And I mean, a very like simple thing with not much intensity in terms of effort that we could do if we want to create like an introductory thing to some of the stuff we did. It's just like sending messages to people you want to get an answer from. And we can just, through audios, this sort of audio. So you get like a pseudo interview format where you can say like, I didn't understand this thing. Can you talk about it? And the person answers. You can just gather these things and we can just publish it. Like have short introductory things. Like I've just done this. It was very easy to do. The hardest thing is that we committed to using images from our daily life. So like I film my dog, I film random things, but if we just use like more abstract imagery, just so it's not like a podcast because nobody, or if, for example, if the person who explains something, who wants to do a little drawing, So I don't know, like it's just to give an idea, John, like perhaps that's a simple format we can try to work together. Like if you want to do, we could do it together. I would be up for it. We can do it in our own time. Like it's not like we need to schedule a meeting and be there. It fits very nicely,
I really
and it doesn't
like
need to be two people. Like for example, John can say something, I answer, and then you guys listen. If you want to add something, like Dennis adds a new message. Yeah, but I want to like you can actually glue this little bits, of a conversation in an asynchronous way,
And something that I thought it could be really something like, well, I mean, someone does a presentation on something, and then they just like, oh, I listened to your presentation, but what the hell is whatever? I mean, and that could be some sort of opportunity. I like that idea.
Yeah,
and I think it answers Reza's suggestion or the idea of getting our work out there.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think it's something I tested. It worked, and I definitely, if anyone is up for it, it can. It's even a good way to benefit from people who are just starting now, like to say, okay, rather than calling up a meeting, let me just send you an audio message to whoever I want some ideas from, like I want to hear more from to help me out, because then we can add it together, and the very process of clarifying these things can then be used for public outlets, So just putting it out there, if anyone is up for doing this sort of thing, I'm definitely up for doing it as well.
We can eventually turn these into TikTok conversations.
Yeah, we can put some like sexy music in the background as well and do like what's it called, like ASMR videos. Like we can just answer it close to the microphone.
That's perfect.
This is what Reza means when he says journal, but I just keep thinking TikTok channel.
TikTok, yeah.
That's like really what our journal is.
To pullbacks and push-outs.
Set theory, category theory.
Yeah,
topos.
I mean, it
That's how
already
we'll get
looks
our
like a
funding.
commutative diagram. Like you can just do this, you know, like this way and this way. So, yeah. Anyway, just putting this idea there because I think it's like I think these ideas that are easy to kickstart and just see what happens is the ones that we need rather than big transformations, because a lot of what we did today was just therapy because it's just a burden to do something new. You know, you just need to kind of ventilate like, oh my God, is this working? Is this not working? It just takes time, but definitely we're not running around in circles. I think that, you know, implementing a bit of new things here and there, but kind of keeping, as I think Rafael said, the crucial thing, like just let's present stuff. Like it just goes to show like the amount of subjective fat around engagement, you know, like it's so hard to just present something. It's all this like, let's reform the critique of everything.
Men will literally invent all the forms of organization before doing a presentation on
Exactly.
Men will literally invent communism before
they present one meeting. Yes, it's crazy, man. Like there is, I really think that there is. I mean, since John is here, I mean, I talk about endurance, you know. But since John is here, and I know he has such an interesting reading of Sartre, I have the impression that these two things I really think we should stop to think about. The first, like, it's more conceptual, which is a meeting is such a complicated idea, man. Like, it's much easier to think about, you know, so many things than just to manage to meet. Like, it's such a complicated thing. But one thing that I really think we need to come to terms at some point is that we're slowly coming so close to the critique of dialectical reason without ever having engaged with it. It's crazy. I really think at some point we should kind of learn what the hell is going on there, like, properly. Every time I open it and I start reading, I see like, this is dangerously close. Perhaps we're just like reading this book, like doing some, how is Chico Xavier's psychography, like just doing a bit of psychography of Sartre stuff. But definitely somebody who I think we're much closer than we, you know, explicitly engage with. Yeah, let's just start. I mean, why not study that while we study Immanence of Truths? Like, just a small commitment as well. Such an easy book.
I mean, it's striking that it appears in there, I think, certainly for the first time in the big books.
Yeah. What's your take on it? Like,
it's not a very protracted discussion, but the fact that it's there at all is striking.
Yeah, I find it very impressive that he never, I mean, I think I've seen him mention one of those texts in The Adventure of French Philosophy, or like a side comment, but he never really engaged. I mean, his case, I think it's more explicitly that, you know, critique of practical ensembles, like, sounds like a really good interpretation of some of stuff he's doing. So I wonder if there isn't like a strategic silence as well about some things. But overall, like, what's your take on the critique of dialectical reason? Like, is it something you find like just a mess, or do you see method in the madness there?
Just to answer superficially, there are gems there for me, and overall, I think it's a mess. Yeah. And yeah, about Sartre, I mean, when you find it necessary to break with Sartre at a certain point in your development, then I think it takes a while to be able to bring him back in a useful way. And we definitely see that with Badiou.
Yeah, which is,
I mean, the Sartre.
For me, sorry, yeah, please.
The Sartre is all over. I think Luca Fraser was the first person to point that out explicitly. But but it's just true, and it's too ubiquitous in some ways to cite or to mention.
Yeah,
I mean, all this talk about. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just doing interjections. Like, yes, by Zeus.
By the dog. Yeah. But yeah, I'm a little burnt out.
Yeah, I think we all are. I mean, at this point, everyone is just falling to the side.
But what a good time. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm looking forward to the next one.
Man, it was such a pleasure you came. Anyway, I'm gonna answer you on the chat anyway about the thing you found there. Anyway, just side conversations. But thank you so much. I also need to go. I need to cook something before my dog and me starve. So
yeah, it was a great meeting.
And Raphael, let's talk Plato soon.
Please.
The other guy, the other elephant in the group's room.
We need more Platonists in this group. I mean, explicit Platonists.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
See you guys. Bye-bye.